Panel on. Welcome back. Good to see everyone, and welcome Sheila home to our military panel. While Sheila is not served in the military, those that know Sheila home, she's cut from a very different cloth, and we're very honored to have Sheila here to with this panel to give us her insights as well as our military friends. So I'm just going to jump right into it, folks. I've got several different things I'd like to talk about. There are so many things going on. If time allows, and I hadn't raised something that's really something you'd like to bring to the surface, just offer it up, please. We're going to begin with Minnesota. We see the chaos unfolding on the streets there. Do you see this spreading? Is the question. We're going to start with Michael Jaco. Do you see this spreading into more states? The chaos in Minnesota. Explore it in
Yeah,
any way you can. Who's behind it? One moment, sir. And are you in favor of President Trump invoking the Insurrection Act? So let's go there, Michael. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I think that it's very possible that it's going to spread. All the other states are watching this. This is pretty much the tip of the iceberg of what's possibly coming. But Trump is handling it very well. He's basically they're finding out, who's doing the funding. That just came out with Kash Patel. He said we have the names. Oh, that's not good because once you get the names, you get the funding. That will carry over into the potential of them doing this in other states. Which many of us predicted that they would
Mm.
do. So that's pretty close to a death knell for the deep state. Using this in different places. So today we have Tom Homan moving in and taking charge and taking it to the next level. We just had another shooting. It remains to be seen. What that was. I think that they targeted that guy. I don't know if that was an execution they did there, but that was kind of the more I look at that, I'm like, they took the gun away from the guy and then they shot him. It's like, uh-oh. So it's what we're seeing from them. They have rules of engagement. They're treating it just like a war, and they're using the press. The press is coming in and watching people and using the system to find license plates numbers. So they're actually tapped into the larger system. Somebody is giving them information. When the ICE agents and so forth are going to hotels, the people that are behind the desk are telling the ICE, not the ICE, but the rioters, that we got some people here. So this is a larger thing. I've seen some of the influencers that are coming in to report, and they're being followed. Once they're discovered to be, not part of the press that is part of their team, then they start to, make statements, and they're calling them out and says shame, shame, shame. These are probably codes. Those of us who've been in the military, I think they're codes that they're using to telegraph that these are not part of our team. The press is, most of the press is part of their team. There's many people within the political establishment are part of their team that's being exposed. President Trump had a conversation with Tim Walz, and Tim Walz decided to, I guess, get on board. So President Trump probably disclosed a lot of information that they had on him and other people within the political establishment. So Tim Walz, I think within hours or so, they sent the police that had been handcuffed by the political establishment. They went in and started arresting people. Now, I did a show just before that, and I was saying we need to go in and start arresting these people and determining who is being paid, who is a paid agitator. Because most of these people there, it's not an organic system where people within the community are like, we want the ICE agents out. Of course, there's some of those, but I think most of them are paid agitators. They're trained just like military would be trained to do different, contact and, cause problems and so forth. We've seen a lot of that happening with these groups. ICE will go in to do an arrest. Normally, it would take 3 or 4 ICE agents. They have to show up with 15 to provide a perimeter while they do their arrest. It's out of control. The local police establishment should have been doing that. So all of the different deep state cities and governorships and states and so forth, California, Illinois, New York, to name just a few, are all looking at how the President Trump reacts to this. And if they do a trip up, which, the recent shooting could end up being a little trip up, but, both sides are going to have little trip ups. And, things are going to be established, things are going to be revealed that are really going to, bring this all to a head. But yeah, I do believe this is just the tip of the iceberg. It will spread to other states. They'll adapt. They'll overcome the problems maybe Minnesota is having right now, and they'll just like they did with the election stealing. They adapted in every single state. If a state came up with okay, we're going to vote like this, then they would the machines broke, and they always had a fix. So that's why we're not getting a lot of information from the get go, because they're trying to cover this to cover their actions. If I'm doing an ambush on somebody, I'm not going to telegraph I'm going to do an ambush on somebody. We're gonna set it up, and so they're going to show up, and we're going to take them down. From that point on, then the deep state's going to know, okay, this is the way they reacted, this is the way they organized, this is the way they took this down. So they're going to adapt. So it's adaptation that's happening on both sides. So we're going to see this go forward like that. We'll make inroads like we're doing right now, I believe, and then they'll adapt, and they'll make it more difficult, or they'll work around. This is the way war works. So we're at war with the deep state here in America now. So it's going to increase. It's going to get more difficult. It's going to get more intense. Bullets are really close to flying. We're I won't say that we're waiting for that, but we're close to that. And once that happens, then we'll probably see insurrection, and we'll talk about that too. Insurrection Act.
Wow. Yes, that's a great analysis in terms of the adaptation from both sides, and this being sort of the test run, if you want to call it that, as this madness moves through other cities and states. What before we move through the panel, let's do a follow up with your question, Michael, on insurrection. It seems to me that most of the people in America, at least the sentiment I'm picking up, everyone's really waiting for the president to invoke the Insurrection Act. Do you think that's coming? And that, of course, I would assume it would be compartmentalized to the location that requires it versus nationwide. So that's part A. Part B is, can you differentiate between insurrection and martial law?
Yeah, I've been into many countries where martial law was being implemented in combat zones and so forth. So I'm familiar with moving around in a military law type environment. You can still get around, although you don't want to get out in the way of like some of the military guys. You don't want to rub them the wrong way. I've I've had placards, and we're obviously Americans. We look like Americans. But when you try and move around some of these military guys, they'll get a little antsy, and you could get lit up. All right. So military law is not where we want to go. And I don't think overall we're going to go to a military law in America. It'll be Insurrection Act that will happen for individual cities. Or, I don't think it's going to get much bigger than that. But we could see major cities have insurrection acts where the military moves in and starts to take down people, because the military, like we saw with Maduro, has some very, very high tech, games that they can play. Because these guys, like I said, will adapt, and it will be more difficult for the like an ICE agent or police or so forth, or National Guard. You'll need more specific, highly trained people to go in and take down some of these bad actors that are out there, and they're highly trained. We got terrorists that are absolutely here in America, and they've fought us for a long time. So we have them in America thanks to the Biden administration on a very high level, thousands of them. So it is going to be difficult in some of these areas to take them down, and absolutely we're going to have military high level professionals going and take care of that.
Well, thank goodness for that. And when you speak about all these terrorists that are well trained in infiltrating this country, oh, certainly over the last 4 years, we It reminds me of Sheriff Richard Mack, who said, "Listen, they're not here to play checkers and chess. People better pray, plan, and prepare." So, thank you, Michael. Let's take the same line of questioning to Derek Johnson. On the subject of Minnesota insurrection and spreading to states and so forth.
Well,
Derek,
it's all to be
yep.
expected. Partial. There's always two parts of this story. 145-47 already shows you that we are, in fact, though, are in a portion of a martial law because we have the suspension of habeas corpus, and that's been used quite a few times. And you've heard Stephen Miller mention that. So, also, the Insurrection Act, president does not have to tell the people that he's invoked the Insurrection Act whatsoever. You can look this up. It's on .gov sites. Does not have to tell the people. It's the same concept of if I know that you're afraid of a wolf and a wolf's at your door, why would I tell you there's a wolf at your door if I can get the wolf off your door without alerting you and then getting you into a stable position to where I can say, hey, I know you don't like wolves. You had one 2 weeks ago. I removed it. Now let's talk about prevention of how we can keep wolves from getting in your yard, getting on your porch, getting to your door. So there's 45-47 outlines that. And, like Walls and this little mayor who has no testosterone whatsoever in his body, but his wife does. His wife was a lobbyist. See, so all this is pointing to the fraud. Now, a portion of this, you're going to have a few agitators get out there because they're paid for. But this is exposing those that are on the lower levels. That's how far we've come in this. We're now to the low level agitators, which is cool, which means all your high big dogs are out. James Comey hasn't posted on his Twitter or X account since June last year. 1.1 million followers. I'm pretty sure if I was having someone talking trash about me and I have 1.1 million followers, I'm pretty sure I could stir them up with, hey, you're following me for a reason. Why hasn't he posted? All right, so there's all these high levels have gone. And if you'll go read the Unconventional Warfare Pocket Guide, you'll see that portions of this is actually staged, all right, to get people, engaged, things of that nature. The other portion is rooting some of these low level, perpetrators out and saying, all right, you want a record for the rest of your life? Come on out, we'll give you one. And if you act even more stupid, we can give you something else called a pine box. If Tom Homan was the solvent the whole time, if he was the solution, he would have been the solution the whole time. See, that's how you go by principles. People don't live by principles anymore, right? The principle is if Walls wanted to work, if this was all real time, if Walls and this mayor wanted to work with President Trump, it would have never escalated to all this publicity and the stink that they've caused if they truly cared about Minnesotans, right? Because Tom Homan's always been there. And that's what Tom Homan does. And ICE was already there. So Tom Homan would not be the solution for libtards and also Democrats, because Tom Homan is a guy who punched me in the ribs and said, keep doing what you're doing. And he sounded like Sylvester Stallone. This guy is the real deal, right? So Tom Homan's not going there to talk about unicorns and fairy tales, right? So if he was the solution the whole time, he was already the solution. So if this was all real time. It's not, though. It's for the people, what we call the target audience, what other people call the normies. Because like the press, there's examples that shows the press, one, when you declare a national emergency, the emergency to that, there is a restricting telecommunications. The president can restrict telecommunications on TV, radio, internet, etc. All right, he can decide what he wants to do, how he wants to use them, if he wants to use certain teams. All right. Well, the appeals court have banned the AP, the Associated Press. They've been banned from Mar-a-Lago and also the White House. All right, the Associated Press now, AP, they're still reporting though, but what are they talking about? So a lot of this is still seeing what certain people are going to do. And Elon put a list out a couple weeks ago of all the news outlets that are fraudulent, and President Trump is still hammering those. So some of this is to see what certain people are writing, possibly, but the ones on the ground, what they're reporting, some of it's distraction because this is all operational. Now, on the bigger picture, talking about martial law, first off, is a military government, and then continuity government, right? The difference in a whole of government and a continuity of government. You heard, quote unquote, Joe mention whole of government from 21 to 25, but then there's an executive order of an invocation of a continuity government. All right, well, I have reason to believe And I don't know when and how they're going to show it in history. But back during January 2021, when the world thought, man, the world was ending, J6 was going on, all this other stuff, there were a lot of things happening in DC. And I sent a video to a buddy of mine. I said, what is this? I said, you ought to know exactly what this is, because that's what we did with air and missile defense. Why is President Trump talking about the Golden Dome so much? That was my MO as in the military, air and missile defense. All right. We know missiles, like nobody's business. Aircraft, ground to air, air to ground. We know missiles. All right. What they were showing in DC at that time period looked like a thing called CRAM. And CRAM is new technology that can knock out a nuclear weapon from the sky, like a missile. All right. And this stuff that they were shooting at that time looked just like CRAM around DC. All right. There were aircraft, military aircraft all over DC from 21, 22, 23 in DC. The Department of War now, but the old Department of Defense, aircraft, our own military has to request clearance to fly into DC. What were tankers, strato tankers, and refuelers doing all over KC, the extenders? What were they doing all over DC, flying multiple circles over DC? Now, Decode can answer that because of the tunnels and special operations, etc. This is unprecedented. All right, so I have reason to believe that we were under a nuclear attack, because what was the last? When you trap the global enemy? All right, they had COVID. That was a biological retaliation. Then they would have had a nuclear retaliation. All right, we bombed the hell out of Iran. We bombed the hell out of Yemen. We've been doing that. These were all executive orders of Obama and Jimmy Carter. All right, so they were on their last stand then, not right now. This is not the last stand. This is the remnants of the residue of the, I guess we could probably on here, the shit that's left from the shit, as says, out of these nations. That's where we are right now. So I have reason to believe when we left the idiot Nuclear Range Forces Treaty in 2018, it all ties into this. All right. And President Trump had them trapped, and it wasn't him, it's the generals, the admirals, but he's the face of it. They're all trapped. All right. And quote unquote, Kamala just said this recently. All right. On her interview with Jimmy Kimmel. Right. This is all strategic. She said this has been decades in planning. All right. So if it's been decades in planning, it's going to have to end at some point. You can't keep dragging this out like some people think we're doing. This is the remnants of it. This is just all to get people engaged. The movie of Melania is coming out. They're getting people engaged. They're getting people locked in. They're using actors and TV and sports. Nick Saban, University of Alabama, my undergrad, he was what most people thought was a liberal. He just paired up with President Trump with an executive order, and he said a speech at the ESPYs or whatever it was, and he said specifically that our game can bring people together, our sports. And President Trump said we're going to have all these sports and all these leads coming in after July 4, 2026. Like, it's all setting up, right? So all this is the end goal, and a lot of people can't see it because they've been brainwashed, but the end goal is still to bring everybody together, Democrat, Republican, liberal, Buddhist, atheist, whatever heck you are, right? To say, hey, look, we have a functioning government. Go read the Federalist Papers. Read what our founders talked about. They had differences. We need differences, and we got to have differences. Same thing with religion, same thing and all that. So when you go read the founders and you watch what President Trump and the generals and all of them are doing, they have strategized this to where everybody can come together on a neutral ground and still have differences. But you got to get people engaged, and you got to break that. And the way they're breaking it is what President Trump says. You got to give them what they want. People love drama in this country. I hate it. They love it. So you give it to them the way they want. You get them engaged. And President Trump, you got to listen to him. He says this all the time. He said that, but he also said with the people out there that, hey, criticism's not always bad. See, because criticism gets them engaged. All right. So you can yell at me all you want. And that's why I use the John Wayne movie all the time, where the little boy was stuttering. And then he said, you almost got your friend killed. And he, well, I tried, and he was stuttering. He said, the hell you did. And he said, if that had been you out there, we'd have heard you loud and clear. But he kept stuttering, and the more John Wayne yelled at him, he spoke clearly. And then when he finally said it, he said a string of expletives where he said, you GD MF son, or you GD mean GD son of a whatever it was. And he said it clear. And John Wayne said, I wouldn't make it a habit of calling me that, son. Right? John Wayne don't care. President Trump don't care. That's why they used a man who has everything in the world. He has nothing to lose. He has nothing to gain, though. He has everything in the world. They used a man who was neutral, who wasn't military, but who also wasn't a career politician. They used somebody who, yeah, maybe he had a hooker in his life or two. Who cares? All right, it's like the Bible talks about. And they're trying to get all these people to break all these barriers of this judgment that people put on everybody, when if we all had to stand up somewhere in our life and say what we just did the week before, it'd be game over. It'd be a stone throwing party like nobody's business. So I think a lot of people need to study more unconventional warfare, irregular warfare. Those are the missing pieces that people are missing right now, that's going to tie in what's taking place lawfully if they know the laws and the orders. You can't just have laws and orders, because this required an extensive military plan, but some of that has been implemented. And an insurrection act is just where President Trump can federally deploy troops with civil authorities. Well, we've already done that. We've already done that. So, that's already been on display. And now it's going to go to other cities. California will be next, but in different places. New Orleans, he mentioned. But certain, like Memphis, I think it was, and New Orleans, they capitulated. He put that in a post like a week ago. He said that they worked with us. So that's already happened, though. This is just step by step. And then Minnesota's exposing all the fraud, the Smileys, and billions of dollars. I mean, think of billions of dollars out of Minnesota alone. So it's a lot of things going on to unpack, but most of this stuff's already happened. This is just bringing in the target audience to get them engaged, bait, and switch.
Interesting perspectives. And, you basically unconventional warfare, fifth generational warfare is what we're witnessing take place. And you mentioned uniting us at somewhere in your dialogue. And I think the more things that get exposed, we're in exposure phase as well, and that'll escalate later. I think the unity is going to come together, because not with everyone, of course, the crazies will remain so, but a lot of people will start to operate off right versus wrong versus parties. Same question with Minnesota insurrection, etc. Brad Wozni, if you'd like to take that on.
No, I think it's pretty great, because it also ties into, even Bannon just had it on War Room right before we came on, that Canada, Venezuela, China, Carney, who doesn't even have an X profile that has a gray check mark, and there's a perfect calm ever since he was installed in April of 2025, does not have a gray check mark on his Twitter X profile. And he keeps getting tagged by Scavino, the White House, and Trump on X with that regular blue check mark. So there's a massive calm there. And they're also disclosing that Venezuela is funding the ICE protesters as well, alongside Soros and all of those initiatives. That's pretty big. And then we also saw in Canada just today, Surrey, BC, which has a 69% crime rate, which everybody's like, where is Surrey, BC? That's just part of the Port of Vancouver, where there was the big drug bust that was announced less than a year ago, where they found the largest amount of Chinese and Mexican Sinaloan cartel fentanyl, which had ever been produced in the world, which could kill about 250 million people of the world, something in the RCMP reported like 15 times over. And that is right there beside Surrey, BC. And the mayor of Surrey, BC today, who supported DAI, all of the vaccinations of the mass genocide, which the vaccines are, right? They are, and then it's everywhere, even today, and even RFK is out there right now. And this all ties back to what is going on in Minnesota and all across the parts of the world, and the new accord that was just signed between India and the EU today as well, is that they are turned all these people, which could have been, God-fearing, great patriots in all the nations, right? One America, continent of America, making America great again, bringing us back, like Juan called me, and I had reported here on the show, and Juan and I have done shows as well, on December 24th of 2024, 26th, Boxing Day evening, and said, we're going to buy Greenland we are going to welcome Canada back into America, since it was Colony Canada, Article 11, 1777, America's first constitution, and the 2nd Canadian Regiment fought with George Washington, and bring that back. Well, the mayor of Surrey, BC right now, the most crime-ridden city all across Canada, which used to be, full on, mostly white populated and Native American Indian populated. You just go back a few generations and see that, said, we are calling upon Ottawa to send in the military to help us clean this up because of the Indian gangs from India, the one right beside Pakistan, Indian gang warfare, which is going on, and we can't handle it. The RCMP can't handle it. The local police can't handle it. And a lot of them are on the take as well, as it's been exposed. So that Insurrection Act and the fact that it's just played out on Bannon's War Room, and I believe Alex Jones just picked up that story too, that Canada is funding the Minnesota ICE protests. 2 months ago, we just had Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, caught with a $111 million ad doing election interference in America, and Trump even called it out at the White House and said that he would be under investigation for election interference. So all of this, I think, is to try to pull everybody together, John, and for your audience, to say that, okay, it's not just Minnesota, but it's other places, and preparing everybody to watch the gauntlet start to be dropped, because we have, what did Tom Holman just call it a few hours ago? Operation Metro Surge. And, he posted on X a few hours ago, said, I met with Governor Tim Walz, and I met with the other Minnesota representatives, and they're going to work with us. That's what Tom Holman just posted. It's up on the White House page right now. They re-truthed it, re-X'd it as well. So it's really potent and it's powerful. And if everybody wants to Derek, who just so eloquently pulls everything together with everything he knows from his photographic memory and the EOs, his background, remember that it was only a few years ago on Michael Jaco's birthday, Derek and I are in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and Juan O'Savin treated us and a whole bunch of other people to an absolute spectacle. And I had just shown up, and I was there for about 2 hours, and Louis Herms is standing on my right, and there's a speaker up at this little thing called the Truth Tour. And I had just met Louis. I mean, we've been meeting online through Zooms, but in person the first time. And Louis is on the phone, and I'm like, what? This is kind of interruptive. We're at the back here, and there's his speaker and the Truth Tour talking up there. What's going on? And he goes, Juan O'Savin wants to know where we are at the Kiwanis Community Center, I-25, Cheyenne, Wyoming. Okay. And he goes, I think he's going to arrive here by helicopter. Maybe about 20 minutes go by. Derek's outside. Louis joins him. Derek's doing a live stream. I'm up on the mic 7 or 8 minutes in to giving my presentation on what's going on. Boom, F-16 tailpipe right out the window shake, like a scene right out of Top Gun, 100%. Like, that's crazy. That's rare. That's never happened. We take a few minutes, about 2 minutes. We're like, that was awesome. Okay, cool. We sit down in the chair. I start talking again. Interrupted by another afterburner tailpipe F-16. So we all go outside. We had 8 F-16s, 100 to 150 feet off the deck. And you've got Michael here. You've got Derek here, likely Sheila as well. And as you all well know from this story being shared multiple times over the years, that we had it verified by multiple people that there's only one of 2 people in the American government that can declassify residential airspace like the Kiwanis Community Center in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and allow military jets to overfly it at 100 to 150 feet off the deck. And that happens to be the commander-in-chief or the one who's running all of the Joint Chiefs at the time. And that was it. And then Juan called and said, did you guys like the air show? And by the way, we also had C-130s. We had helicopter Blackhawks for 5 more hours waving at us. Now, the Truth Tour, as we're still going on and having our presentations and mingling with these patriots during mass lockdowns. So it's truly amazing for everybody to take away from that as we're talking about Insurrection Act and what's to come and what's to play out for the normies and bring them on, as well as I talked about the vaccine genocide, what also was, played out many times and is well up there now. Even President Trump truthed it a few months ago that all vaccines are poison. And that we saw that what is in these vaccines, COVID-19 and also in the flu shot, which is rolling out there, which is really unfortunate. I don't know if it's still in it for sure. I can't tell you. But what we've seen all the evidence, and even the McCullough Foundation put it out there as well, and said the mRNA gene editing biotech weapon, which is what is classified by the Alliance of Indigenous Nations, whom I've had on my show, and they are an international tribunal, and they are recognized by Canada, and they are recognized twice by the Supreme Court of the United States, has classified them as a weapon of mass destruction. They are a gene editing biotechnological and radiological weapon. And Peter McCullough and the McCullough Foundation just put out and said, based on all the evidence that we've assembled, it has a 100% or near 100% rather, I don't want to take that exact words right from his mouth, that it alters the brain chemistry and it hooks people up like into the Internet of Things in antennas. And we've seen other massive shows, and Michael's done these shows for years, and I've talked about it on my show as well, that it then has the ability for people to be hooked up and it takes over their brain chemistry. So that can also be going on right now. And that fifth generation or 5G warfare you were talking about, the spiritual level, the emotional, the physical, the financial, the enslavement, everything which has been happening to us, and the medical, I think it's all coming to a culmination, because you're seeing, as Derek just so perfectly put it, it's the residue, it's the mid-level and the lower level that still need to be removed. And what did President Trump just do last week, as I wrap up here? He signed an executive order to bring back mental institutions. And he even said in that press conference, he goes, I really hate to do this, but that's kind of where I guess most of these people belong if they don't clean themselves up, or they're not even having any more self-awareness that they need that type of a help to eventually be cleaned up and hopefully restored, to the way that they should be in their body. And I feel that this is truly remarkable. And I know the world is watching, John, not only just on your show here, but from all of the political and the business establishments across all of the nations of the world, because they're looking at what America is going to do. Because if they're going to do that in their own country and they're going to clean up their own cities and they're partnered with America, that they need to make sure that their act is the same. And on February 11th, we have coming up, General Raising Cane has just called upon all 34 nations to bring in and have a General Assembly meeting of all the military leaders of 34 nations. You can't just ring up and say, hey, in the next 2.5 weeks, I'm having a conference and I expect you to be there. And that's going to happen unless you know that there is absolute control of the Western Hemisphere with the Don Roe Doctrine in effect and playing out. And they know that as well. And I think that is going to be something to watch. What happens on February 11th, too, from that conference.
Fascinating, incredible times we're living in. And to our audience, we're going to, what we can expect is a lot of chaos, and we see it around us. And you alluded to some of the chaos in Canada moments ago, and other places around the world, because we're putting order in. The geopolitical landscape is changing. We're actually beginning one nation at a time, starting here at home in America, freeing nations from the demonic, satanic, tyrannical forces that have made life a living hell on this planet. So the chaos is what we're witnessing as we begin, and not just with Trump leading the way, but with our alliances around the world, putting order into things. To our audience, just pray, plan, and prepare. That's what you can do, and keep putting the truth out there. But expect chaos, expect disruption. This is going to happen, and it has to happen in order for us to get to the other side. Sheila Holm, thank you for joining us. It's good to see you here on this panel. You've been listening to our other panel guests. How would you like to weigh in on the Minnesota, the Insurrection Act, and the things we've been discussing?
Minnesota is the template. And I'm hearing chatter now that it's not just going to be 12 cities, it's 15. And at the same time, they brought up the penguin unit, just like people were shocked about the ghost unit. And so to have a penguin unit that can be trained in the deep freezing weather that we've been experiencing, even here in Georgia, it's not going to get above freezing. It's going to be in the barely double digits all week at night, and a lot of rain during the day. It's just crazy. It never gets above 40. It's just, we're in this, and we're in it for the long haul. But there was a wonderful thing that happened tonight while the president was flying out to Iowa. He's in Iowa tonight, and speaking. It's like a rally in Iowa a year after the primary last year, thanking them. And he sent out a message that was quite profound. And it was that he sent J.D. Vance, and the mayor and the governor didn't want any help. and they wouldn't help. And so then he sent out Homan, and he said to all of us, he's going to get a great report from Homan, and then they're going to figure out what they're going to do. So tonight he decided he's not getting any answers, and they're not wanting to provide any help. And so now he sent in the 101st Airborne and under the general, and they're on their way there by helicopter tonight, landing by helicopter tonight. That should kind of put Minneapolis on its ear. So that's what's happening in the right now. And there were such amazing statements, because I didn't know, from not being a military background, family, but not myself. And so where we're at with Minnesota, my dad's family is Norwegian, and none of the cousins, because I contacted them, none of the cousins were aware that their state Senate candidate in Minnesota is working with Walls. And she's the organizer of the riots that are going on in Minneapolis right now. So we found the training group, we found all the lies. And the man, I did hear, Jaco, I did hear that the man that had the gun and the multiple magazines, so he wasn't just there, because a lot of our guys are conceal and carry around the country, but this guy didn't just have the gun, but he had the gun and multiple magazines that he never would have needed unless he had an assignment for the event. And so when they grabbed him, he didn't have the safety on, and his gun went off. And that's what happened. And so they've done a major investigation on that the latter part of today. And that's what they're announcing right at the end of today. There is a problem with the Insurrection Act. If the Insurrection Act, as it happened with Abraham Lincoln, when that happens and you go into a civil war, you cannot recover the republic. And that's why they didn't hold on to the republic, just for Grant was the last president right after the Civil War. And so where we're at right now is there's two things that have gone on. And Derek had mentioned the unconventional warfare. So that manual has been shared, and I've shared that with many people. The other one is military government. And military government is a lot about what we have going on right now because of the transition, I believe, between the corporation, because you have to unpeel the whole thing, or everybody's involved in sedition, because you can't have two governments at one time. And so I think Derek was very gently covering all of that as to how we hold all this together during this time on this transition. And so where we're at right now is that this military government was just an outline signed in 1949. That's, I believe, what Eisenhower gave unto President Kennedy. And that military government, they confirmed, was just an outline. So they said on these bullet points, and it's only like 53 pages at that time, much bigger now, big notebook now. So what they said was, this is going to give you the outline that you're going to follow, and you're going to get ready, because the Q team has tried this 6-7 times since the Civil War. And it just hasn't worked. Lost a lot of lives, but didn't get through. We had to have a Trump to come in and stand in. He and President Kennedy were the two that never got attached to the corporation. Neither one of them took a salary from the corporation. They kept themselves completely independent of the corporation. And so what we have going on right now, by Minnesota being a template, is that Minnesota, what is happening is identical across the country. And it's the same with the cartels. These guys are all coordinated with and funded by our government through our taxes. And so what we have is a battle on our land. And that's why the summary is very similar to what Derek and Jacob were going over earlier, is that these guys knew exactly what to do. Our guys have captured all of the signal communications, and they said everything is exactly like it was in Afghanistan, exactly like it was in Iraq. These guys are operating in the same way as those who were operating this way when we were on the other side of the world. So now here we are in our own land, and we've got people internally, legal Americans, helping this happen in America with our money. And so it's much deeper than people realize. It's not going to be quick. It's not going to be handled quick. But our military has been trained up in a military government structure so that they're ready to help the people that need the help. And they're ready to stand in with the people who want the help. And it's just now turned in Minnesota, where the people themselves are coming forward and asking ICE what they can do. It took all of this to get us to this point. So when they were ramming him with a car, Yeah, I think you guys saw that whole thing, and all the media said was they didn't run over his body. She didn't run over his body. But then we found the rap sheet. I put out the Lake and Riley, and then we got the rap sheet. The woman had a horrendous rap sheet. Then we find out she's been trained. That led us to the group that's training him. That led us to the state Senate candidate that knows that she's the organizer over the training and choosing the people to be involved in certain tasks and activities. And all of this, as Derek and Jacob were already confirming, was highly organized, highly set up. They know exactly what they're doing. They're able to communicate with each other. This is not a random situation, and it's not a regular protest. These people know what they're doing. They've been trained how to resist and to fight against ICE. They know exactly what's going on. And this is across, and now they have found evidence of this now in 15 cities instead of 12. We'd heard 14. I've heard 14 for a long time, that there were going to be 14 cities that were going to rise up. So, but to head into insurrection, and yet the president joked the night of Maduro, after the skiff and everything was done at Mar-a-Lago, he was on the plane and he was talking to the press corps. And he said, did you know that George W., did you know that he actually went through and issued out 22 insurrections? And I was like, what? He had more than one? And because everybody's making a big deal, is he going to do it or is he not going to do it? But the coordination of this, and there was one other thing, when you were mentioning, Jaco, about AP, the Associated Press, now why are they being blocked? Why are they being stopped? I spent a lot of time with ABC in San Diego. There were plans to do things with ABC in San Diego, and I'm glad I didn't go any further in the contracting with San Diego's ABC station. But the 4 a.m. memo, remember hearing that comment? Somebody's giving these guys a 4 a.m. memo, and they're all saying the same things on all the stations. That 4 a.m. memo is the teletype that comes out from AP. AP has been coordinating all of this for generations. And so they've known, and it's way beyond Mockingbird Media now, because it's actually a format and structure that all of the nations tune into, all of the nations involved. We never wrote anything originally. It all came off of the AP wire every morning at 4 a.m.
Reminds me of Good Morning Vietnam, where Robin Williams, the actor, of course, grabbing the fake reports off the thing, and just 7 people did not get killed today in the bar, and so forth and so on. They've been, and now it's on steroids. To your point, you raised a lot of great things there, Sheila, and a couple of comments. Soundbite, of course, but you're right. This began with JFK, who didn't sign up with the Corp, and President DJT is going to finish it off, who also is not acquiescing to the Corp, and in fact ended it. And this has been a plan long in the making, as everyone on this panel well knows. And last comment I have, based on some of the content you provided, Sheila, is these insurrectionists, these funded people, these agitators, whatever word you like to use for them, they don't. Yes, disruptive, and it's going to get worse before it gets better, but they have no idea what they're up against. The military and the intelligence, they have no clue. And we've already won this in many ways, but it's got to play out. And so it does. So thank you all very much for taking that on. I want to bring us to Caroline Levitt, who said, quote, Barack Obama attempted to overthrow the U.S. government in 2016. The sitting president in 2017, and then effectively overthrew the election of 2020. He and his friends in the different agencies. The DNI has also released, of course, the evidence of election theft of 2020. It is now a fact. We've known this, and many Americans who are awake knew this, but this is now a fact, validated within the administration. President Trump, last week at Davos, we know what he said. I'm paraphrasing. He said they stole the election. Everybody knows that. And then he said this: prosecutions are coming soon. So we'll go back to the top of the panel with Michael Jaco. Michael, what do you make of President Trump's statement concerning prosecutions coming soon in light of the election theft? What do you believe the course of action is necessary to right that wrong now that it's been validated to be true? what's next when he says prosecutions are coming soon, and how do we right the wrong of 2020 election? As Juan says, it ain't over yet. How do you see this playing out? This is a big deal. As Trump said, it should be big breaking news, and it's just like nothing. This is unbelievable. They stole the United States of America, and the former president orchestrated it within the agencies. Of course, we overthrew ourselves by and large. It was external as well. Anyway, I'm rambling here. Michael, do you want to take this on? How do you see it playing out with these statements that the president just made?
Yeah, there's so many people involved. I mean, you look at CIA, John Brennan. He basically was, the head of, trying to take Trump down. I like what Derek says. A lot of these guys, they got these, X accounts and so forth with all these people on them, like Clapper, and we haven't heard anything from them for a long time. I remember when President Trump first came in, John Brennan was like every day bashing President Trump. We haven't heard from him in a long time. I just had a gentleman on my show that talked about how he's treasonous, and when the real information starts to come out just on John Brennan, it's going to blow everybody away. So we have multiple people that were involved in this election fraud and election steal, going all the way to China. So once we start to see all of these people that have been involved and have, caused this problem, like President Trump said during his speech at the WEEF conference, he's coming after them. There's massive amounts of fraud. The New World Order is dead. There is no. It's the old world order, and the new world is us. Basically overcoming this extreme corruption, treasonous activities. So we know what happens to people that commit treason. And President Trump came out with firing squads again. He voted that, signed that back in. So in his last term, so we're moving in that direction. So a lot of people know that. They're, on shaky grounds. I think probably some of them have already been dealt with. Probably a lot of them, actually. Like we're talking about, we haven't heard from some of these people in a long time. Why? Because they're no longer around. Maybe it gets to Gitmo or, Guam or Seychelles or wherever wherever we have, these new holdings, because there's a lot of people that have committed crimes. And just Gitmo is not big enough for all of them. They got barges down there, all kind of crazy stuff. But the number of people that are going to be filling some of these, prisons is astronomical. So when does it come out for the public? What everybody wants to see. They want to see these public, trials and executions and people going to jail and so forth. It's coming. You have to just be patient. A lot of us that are military, these things take time. A lot of the stuff that I did when I was in the military still hasn't come out. A lot of the things that I did when I was in the CIA still have not come out. And they would be very revelatory, and people would be stunned by some of the things that we did and accomplished. But it takes time for these things to eventually roll out. There's stages, and when they come out, when this happens, we're going to release this. Oh no, they did this, so we have to wait now. So there's a lot of these things that have to transpire before all of these things get revealed. But revealed they will be, and the criminals that have been involved will be prosecuted. We're only talking like 1 or 2% of the population. Yeah, that's a lot. That's tens, hundreds of thousands of people. Yeah. But the rest of America, the other 98%, we're going to live amazing lives, and it's already started. It's frustrating not to see this happen sooner, but I'm a very patient man. I see it. I think all of us in this panel, we've seen these things. We try to inform people the best we can to be calm, be patient. It's coming. Some of these things have already transpired. They'll be revealed in their right time. So yeah, amazing things are happening. These guys are being taken down. The reveals are going to be tremendous. Just be patient.
Excellent analysis and good advice to everybody listening on the patience aspect. believe me, well, don't believe me, just listen to Michael Jaco. This is a military operation. On a hunch, they know a little bit more than the average person on the street about warfare, whether it's kinetic or otherwise. The plan is unfolding, and it's been a long game. Some say before JFK, but we can use JFK till now as for sure the operation. And so Michael talks about patience. Well, there's some patience, and you revealed, Michael, that there's data that you know about from the previous roles you acted in the CIA, for example, that still haven't been revealed or played out. So, folks, just trust the plan and know that God's in control. So, trust in your faith. We'll take the same question to Derek Johnson about the president's statements at Davos and the progress we may be making. How do you see all this playing out?
Was 45-47 again is a pre-planned strategic operation, meaning every aspect of this has been pre-planned. So this is the part we're in the rollout portion. So this is where we are in the rollout. One, like Jaco, we were just talking about military protocol. We have to do it right. We have to do it right. We have to get it right. And the only way to do it right, get it right, for humanity's sake, is to make sure that we do it with integrity. Because the first moment that we slip or cut corners, guess what the enemy's going to do? There's no integrity in that. It's the same thing as shooting someone in the back, right? You look them in the face, look them in the eye, you fight on the equal playing field. If you don't have a weapon, you don't have a weapon. That's equality. That is how you're supposed to do it. So there's no way President Trump could have come in and done things the way they did it. Right? You have to have every single aspect of this operation has to be completely different than the hijacking of America after the Ulysses S. Grant that Sheila was talking about in 1871, in that era right in there. All right. We have to prevent it. See, what Americans want to do is get to the birthday party and say, I'm at the birthday party. They want the cake. They didn't see the preparation and also, did they eat, celebrate? Did they stay and clean up? Americans want justice, but they don't want to prevent how we got to this place in history. That's the first thing. Two, where we are is where Eisenhower, and I hate calling him by that, it's a lot easier with his name, but President Eisenhower and five-star general, former five-star general, right? So a five-star. Right, people need to go look up what a five-star is. We won't have time to talk about that, but we're already in the military government portion where it's the aftermath. So a continuity government would be where it's the aftermath where President Trump will implement certain things after a disaster. Well, you can see that with his nominations. The original President Eisenhower continuity government plan and presidential emergency action documents, the original was military people and businessmen and women. All right. And that's what President Trump, every nomination that President Trump has put into place has either been of special operations, which you see back here on this ball cap right here, special operations. They're either special operations or a veteran or let me put it that way, and or a businessman, businesswoman in every nomination to an ambassador seat. Now, not all ambassadors are chief of missions, but all chief of missions are ambassadors. All right. And that's very critical because they act solo. All right. So that's very, very key that they have the confidence, the stature. They can't be compromised. They can't be bought moving into the future. And the third thing about the elections, something as simple as Jack Smith, this just happened this past week. This is really awesome. The testimony and all these other things. It's so genius. It's 5D chess. President Trump gets to be the face of this. He's not the full entity. It's all the generals and the admirals in the background, and world leaders and world generals and world admirals. It's not just ours. This is a world operation. But this was never about 2020, ever. It's a key piece because it's the presidential election, but it's not the end-all, do-all. It's key in taking down, though, the swamp, their rings, and how they kept this charades of games going through the years. I mean, we're talking about the monetary system, the central banks. I mean, we're talking about layers here that we've broken down in other ways. But getting to the election more specifically, there's a few things that can just outline how the whole thing's in operation. One, here's an external that it conjoins in a completely different manner. Fauci, a week before President Trump took the oath, January the 20th, 2017, Anthony Fauci, was at Georgetown University. And he said in a few years, specifically, a few years, that this administration, the upcoming administration, will face a pandemic. How do you know that? All right. You can go back and you can look at about 2 or 3 executive orders by Obama that outline pandemics. All right. Then you know about Bill Gates and Gavi and all his other ties in. And then why would you raise $400 billion, $400 billion, not million, $400 billion and go into third world countries and present vaccines? If you cared about humanity and you're going into third world countries, you would be fixing their water, their irrigation systems, their water, their rivers, their streams, that water, what most of our body operates on, not vaccines. All right, so you saw Bill Gates capitulate to President Trump. You've seen Bill Gates, Tim Cook of Apple, you've seen Jeff Bezos, you've seen Mark Zuckerberg, all capitulated. All right, now I'm not here to debate if they're good or bad ultimately, but they capitulated for the target audience to see. They're all working with President Trump for the target audience to see. Same thing with Elon Musk, same thing. But that's an external factor because in 2018, President Trump has a national biodefense strategy. Go read that. Go read it word for word. 2018, word for word, the national biodefense strategy is exactly what took place in 2020. So President Trump, they already knew. They knew what the enemy could pull in their retaliation. So that's an external factor. The internal factor is Executive Order 13848 that you mentioned in the pre-show, right? It's 13848 with the national emergency that President Trump signed and declared September the 12th, 2018. And in there is a key line. It says, although no foreign power has altered the outcome, or that little conjunction, or vote tabulation in any United States election. It didn't say one, two, a few, many. It said in any. No foreign power has altered the outcome, meaning the whole thing, or vote tabulation. Vote tabulation is January the 6th, the day that they count electoral votes. President Trump sued the 7 swing states December the 14th, 2020. So Nevada, Wisconsin, North Carolina, that crew. The same 7 swing states of 2020 were the same in 2024? No. And he won all of them. All right, that shows strategic. All right, so that knocks out any other court case out there because the whole thing is there. Now, this Jack Smith thing, the Jack Smith, President Trump's case versus United States with the Jack Smith, it specifically talks about how they have to prove how he was appointed lawfully, that Congress can create only Congress can create that office. And then it talks about the appointments clause, which is Article 2 of the Constitution. All right, presidential nomination, Senate confirmation. Who was Jack Smith appointed by? Merrick Garland, Attorney General. Not quote unquote Joe, not quote, is it? So it's a wrap. Then go look at the conclusion of it. It's only like 3 sentences in the conclusion. And it's talking about how the court should grant a stay. And it said that Jack Smith is no more than an emperor in clothes. And then it says that Patrick Mahomes, the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, Kim Kardashian, and Mick Jagger have more standing than Jack Smith. Now, President Trump, if this was in a real normal situation, that right there, jokes with the bar attorneys, with the bar judges, that's not decorum whatsoever. All right. And so that shows you right there the whole thing's an operation because they're putting some funnies, some humorous Patrick Mahomes and Mick Jagger and Kim Kardashian in a conclusion of a massive Supreme Court docket case. All right, that's 23A 745 if people want to look that up on Supreme Court dockets. So that little entity. And then the National Guard, Jaco, Brad, we all know military orders are not continuous orders. They're not continuous, meaning like they have to have congressional authorization because the Constitution does say the president is the commander-in-chief of the Army and the Navy, and then Congress declares the wars. Well, this is where the Congress messed up in the years because of their wanting to have more control. They amended the War Powers Act of 41 and 42 and 73. And in there, they made it to where a president must declare a national emergency and then give 48 hours notice. He only had 60 days with the military and a 30-day withdrawal, a total of 90 days. All right. Well, there's not one single foundational Title 10 or Title 32 on the board anywhere by quote unquote Joe Biden. So how are the troops at the border? How are the troops deployed to elections? The polls. 2018, 2020, 2022, 2024. 14 to 27 states have had National Guard deployment, National Guard cybersecurity teams. They have to be either a Title 10 or a Title 32. If they're SAD status, they still will be operating federally because that federal elections, it's not a state thing only. All right, so that's where that ties in. And so why would quote unquote Joe continue Executive Order 13848 with the national emergency 4 years in a row just to hand back to President Trump January the 2025 to call him a dictator, to call him a Nazi, to call him a king, and then the National Guard are out there. The cybersecurity teams, they are there to prevent any kind of hacking, which means addition or deleting of the votes. So Jack Smith in this quote unquote testimony is perfect because he don't say it was specifically asked about President Trump, the question, especially one of the questions from Pramila Jayapal or Jayapal, however you say her name. All right. She specifically asked about democracy and all this other stuff and a sitting president trying to steal the election. So they're trying to accuse President Trump of stealing the election. And President Trump is saying the 2020 was stolen. So see, there's a principle there, right? You can't have, so you would say, okay, if you thought this was real time and someone says, oh, your guy stole it. And I'm saying, well, your guy stole it. Then there's got to be a what? A common denominator. Well, the National Guard is that common denominator. And they will have all the real numbers because we, the military, we work with analog, not digital, which means we can't be hacked. All right. And Colonel Lennox that's on here, friends of ours, but a friend of mine especially, he specifically worked in this field and he specifically tells people, hey, our systems were set up not to be audited. All right. And I it's so humorous. I saw something just yesterday on one of the new .gov sites, and they're using an acronym, and I don't know if Jaco will remember this or Brad, but it's called a dagger, and it's a little device that we had to use, and it's between systems, and this is how complicated some of our military systems are, and they're so old, some of them. With air and missile defense, we had a certain little device, and then we had this little dagger, and then we had this machine that it goes to, and each one you had to type in something to it, right? Every little thing. So, but if you messed up anywhere along the way, you had to go all the way back to the beginning and go again. All right, that's how our systems are. All right, and so that's why this is so humorous in another manner, because it's that simple for the people out there who really do want to know what's going on, and to give you some peace, comfort, whatever, or even really excitement and fuzzy feeling in your heart, because that's what makes people like me over here laugh, because I have worked these systems and know that, okay, these systems they're complicated when you're working with them, but whenever you have the results, you know what it took to get to those results. And the National Guard have every result from 2018, 2020, 2022, 2024 elections, and it was never about 2020. And there's certain things that can show you that the whole thing was a trap, and it trapped every entity on every aspect, and they come to a Trump wall everywhere they go. And that's why he uses the term white flag of surrender all the time. They're not telling on them. They're not snitching. They're making these people come to the walls, even though it's a target audience and it's all a movie and it's all pre-planned. But for the people that thinks it's real, every one of these entities are coming to a wall, and they're going to have to raise a white flag. Tim Walz, raise a white flag, right? Mayor Frey, raise the white flag. Tom Homan, So, we already know Tom Homan's in control of everything, well, ICE. So if Tom Homan was the answer, he was the answer the whole time, right? He would have never had to brought him in for the Minnesota thing. So see, it shows the whole thing when people dissect it and flip the picture around. But you do have to know still unconventional warfare, irregular warfare, some hybrid warfare, and know that yes, JFK was the main driving factor in guerrilla warfare, being in special operations, but more not just special operations, but military as a whole, to be critical thinkers, strategic thinkers, not just certain entities of our military. And President Trump is the first person, and Jaco can tell you this especially because he's been on these operations in years past, but President Trump is the first to implement the tunnel warfare in a strategic plan. And you're seeing that right now as well. And Israel's talking about Gaza and how they can't, they can't get Hamas, and but Hamas is going to surrender and give us all their tunnel information. This stuff is entrenched, all pun intended, with layers and layers and layers of what's taking place. So, a lot of the 2020 election, it wasn't a distraction in another manner, but it is in another manner, meaning that the actual stealing of the elections were the Dominion systems, Venezuela, and then the swing states, the battleground states. That's how they kept certain people in place to keep their checks and balances going with their money, with their reins, and what they were doing. And it could keep going nationally. We could talk about this forever, but especially like child trafficking, sex trafficking, human trafficking. You hear people out there say, why is it more prevalent? Why wouldn't we see it? Why wouldn't I see a child taken? I'm like, you don't understand. It don't work like that. They don't need every child. They do this in discreet, but the ones they do get, right, it's massive money on their side of things, and that's how they did all this. But anyway, we could keep going. I'll be quiet.
Well, thanks, Derek. You raised a lot of great points. I'll just focus our audience on one takeaway, and that is that, as you stated, the so-called Joe Biden administration for 4 years didn't revoke some of these critical executive orders, and I think that's a door opener for people to start going down the rabbit holes and arrive at a place that this panel is already at. Same question to Brad Wozni, discussing the election debacle, and again, Barack Obama. President Trump, we remember the press conference a while back where he talked about treason and the punishment for treason for those that have committed it. He reminds us of that, and recently in Davos, reminding us that we caught them, they did it, and they'll be prosecuted soon. So, what's your views of all that?
Well, John, you've had him on the show. I think he's a national treasure. West Point grad, 1961. The man who co-drafted America First for President Trump, Major General Paul E. Vallely. And I was just talking with him 2 days ago. And you can go to August and you can go to June of 2010. And General Vallely is out there saying that we need to invoke in the Declaration of Independence, which Abraham Lincoln had in his own inauguration speech, the fact that Barry Soetoro, these are the direct quotes from General Vallely on Newsmax and other media outlets, is by de facto a non-U.S. citizen. And as a result of that is deceitful, it is treasonous, and he and other members of Congress and his administration are traitors to the United States of America, its Constitution, and all of its articles, and what it holds so dear. And then, funny enough, just fast forward a few years to about 2014, Obama's on a major network news saying there's this guy named General Vallely who wants to march 250,000 soldiers into Washington and take back the government and throw a coup. Coincidentally, all of a sudden ISIS put, and it still has not been removed, a hit on General Vallely's forehead. That's why, since he went to Syria in 2012, is the oldest general from West Point at 72 years old to lead troops in combat and take fire and return fire as well as his own. He has never been able to go back to that African continent because ISIS still has today that hit on his forehead. So you fast forward to what you just saw, and has been repeated here in that incredible conference over at WEF in Davos, where I say, President Trump, that was like the State of the Union address to the world of the hatchet is coming across, right? People call it the white flag of, surrender. And yeah, sure, from that standpoint. But when you look at the definition of the terms of the Law of War Manual, because we're moving into the Law of Peace Manual, I believe it's already done. It's ready. It's already backstopped, and they've got it printed and ready to roll out when the time is ready. And I believe that's going to be in these next few months, because the Board of the Peace is the precedent which is set for everybody to get the nations on board. And right after that, perfect, you had President Putin issue a press release. We're going to give $1 billion of seized assets to fund the Board of Peace as soon as the war is over in the Ukraine, which is what we want. Then we will join the Board of Peace. We'll have eternal peace. Eternal peace goes right back to Scripture as well. And that's exactly what we want to stand for, right? Like Roosevelt said, walk softly, carry the big stick. And the biggest stick is the FAFO of the Department of War and the U.S. military right now. So what President Trump also pointed out there is we all just saw succinctly, he talked about COVID from Wuhan and China. And as we also know, those biolabs are in Winnipeg, Manitoba. We also know that Dominion Voting Systems, the headquarters for that is in Canada, Venezuela, China. And then we have all of these different, but the headquarters is in Canada, which Trudeau just loved and ponied up to, right? And it's responsible for the stealing of elections consistently over generations, I believe, and it wasn't named Dominion then. And through Operation, through Scorecard and Hammer, as both Lieutenant General Thomas McInerney have pointed out, General Valley, and some of the other amazing retired flag officers, and actually had Lieutenant General McInerney in 2021. You can still see the video online where he had left the White House briefing President Trump about Operation Scorecard and hammered the secret CIA program to flip votes after they had come in, and let President Trump know, yes, you have it all. This is where it's come from as well. And there are members of the SES, deep state members, some of them, perhaps all of them, I don't know, I'm just a BRAD, that have capitulated. We've seen that also through the World Economic Forum. Where do you have that? Well, you have the Secretary of NATO, the head of NATO, Mark Rutte, who just a year ago, the Dutch farmers were pouring pig shit right on his front lawn in the Netherlands, because what did he want to do? He wanted everybody following his, Klaus Schwab, his daddy, and sitting there going, you will eat bugs, you'll be happy, you'll have nothing, and we're going to take the farmland. But now he's the head of NATO, and that head of NATO is issuing a press release backing President Trump and everything he said at the World Economic Forum, in particular, supporting his efforts for Greenland. As Juan said 2 years ago, we're going to buy Greenland. It's amazing what 107 has said is coming to fruition, right? We're going to welcome Canada back into America. We're sitting here right now recording this as Jeffrey Rath and the members of the Alberta Prosperity Project, which is for the independence of Alberta, to make it a sovereign nation state. Think like Texas, the Republic of Texas. So they want the Republic of Alberta, and they're negotiating probably right now at dinner time in Washington with Secretary Scott Bessent in the U.S. Treasury and members of his board, which both parties have acknowledged publicly, in particular U.S. Treasury Scott Bessent, negotiating a $500 billion credit facility with maybe JP Morgan Chase. The fact, by the way, he's getting sued for $5 billion US for debanking conservative Americans over the last 6 years, including some of those you see here. 107 as well has mentioned that and put it out in the shows. He was debanked as well. You're looking at a Canadian here who is debanked too. And sitting here going, $500 billion for a sovereign nation state of Alberta, the moment that we have Albertans say we want independence, and then it happens and they're immediately left, and then they have this trade that immediately begins with the United States, and that deal is done. It's almost kind of like what Juan has foreshadowed about welcoming Canada back into America is playing out for us right now, like a movie, so to speak. But it's still really real for all of us. And I think the fact that you are seeing the heads starting to roll in a public way in terms of arrests, of course, it would be really nice to see those military tribunals and the ones that we believe have been happening behind the scenes and happen to know. And by the way, Derek's here, who was given a press pass to come to Gitmo, and he was authorized and went through all the security clearances and even received one just over 2.5 years ago in the summertime. So the fact that all of your audience here are going, what is it? Is this really real? We can see some things that we can fact check online. It is pretty amazing. Those executive orders were never revoked or rescinded, during the term of the auto pen Biden. And how we are right now, that we've just come back from that Davos meeting where you can have journalists, independent media guys, chase Trudeau, Burla, Greg Schmidt, or Eric Schmidt rather, and Bill Gates and all these other deep staters, David Sachs, Royal Bank Canada, Christine Lagarde, you name it, down in the streets, which a year ago, and I just had one on the show on Sunday night, Calum Smiles of Vox Populi Media, said you couldn't get that close. It was extremely hard to do that. And there was security everywhere, and literally been told that there are buildings that are empty in Davos right now, which used to be rented out at 75,000 Swiss francs per day, Reuters being one of them, and Reuters was nowhere to be seen. So I think it's truly remarkable what we're seeing that is being played out for the public around the world. And no longer do you have to feel that scrutiny, and the censorship of media, which were blowing us up, right, with fact checks and hitting us. Michael knows this greater than any of us, TikTok and YouTube accounts and whatnot coming down just a year ago. And DJT had only been in office as 47, a year and a week. And it's freaking remarkable. I don't know if there's another part of the question I haven't answered here, John, but that's kind of where I'd leave it, unless you want to ask something more targeted and go over to the great Sheila Holmes. Save the best for last, ladies.
Well, thank you, Brad. We'll have Sheila weigh in just a moment. In listening to your analysis, I think the public can see, and the collective analysis of this panel so far, we're moving very, very swiftly. Even though we have to be patient on certain events, I mean, the things the president laid out at Davos against the World Economic Forum, I mean, that's a lot of big things, and he just shifted the earth on its axis. We are moving very rapidly on some very big events, and that's a good thing. And back to Canada, I mean, obviously President Trump is not a big fan of China stepping in and doing business with Canada, as the memes are putting out there, and that's not going to work out that way. A real quick answer, Brad. How does it end, in your opinion? The situation of Canada, officially becoming part of the United States, as I know it is, but you know what I'm talking about. How do you see this playing out? Will this China disruption just be a mosquito at the end of the day?
Personally, I don't think it's a mosquito. I think it's really important to have that as the big elephant in the room, so to speak, from lever action, right? A fulcrum, for people who are used to remembering swing sets as kids, right? The fulcrum, the teeter-totter. So you see this inverse relationship, teeter-totter, inverse relationship. For example, Carney comes out here, has the China conference just days. He's in Beijing just days before he goes over to Davos, disses and ghosts Trump. Not that President Trump, the commander-in-chief, 5-star general of America right now, is worried about being dissed by little Carney, who, a couple of months ago, one of the shows Derek and I did, Derek showed, here's Carney meeting with Trump in the Oval Office. Do you notice anything about his Harvard Business School and hockey picture has him at this height? But he's standing next to President Trump and he's really this height all of a sudden. How do you shrink 7 inches, in a matter of 2 decades? That just doesn't happen. So again, actors, right? And where I'm going with this is it's got to be the massive fulcrum of China. So for those who hadn't been paying attention or didn't see, because there's so much going on, Carney goes to Beijing, says we're doing the deal with China and we are embracing the one China policy in Canada. Remember, we're already actively doing military exercises, which prior to the Trudeau government under Harper was acknowledged as an enemy of Canada, but they're doing joint military exercises. China has military bases all on their own, just like an embassy of their own private land under FIPA, the Foreign Investment Protection Act, in Canada, Canada Crown Corporation passed with Trudeau, when China can buy anything they want, set up anything they want. It's theirs. It's sovereign land and territory in Canada. That's happened. They have their own military bases. We already know about the police stations and whatnot. They have bought full tracts of land. It's been happening across states, as we know. All of a sudden, Trump issues a Truth Social post, and says, yeah, Carney, if you do that deal with China, 100% tariffs against Canada immediately. The next morning, Carney comes out just days ago and says, we've decided we're not going to pursue the deal with China because we want to embody and embrace the Canadian first policy all of a sudden, right? So that teeter-totter effect is working extremely well. And also what we've just seen is the ramp up in the signatures for the petition of Alberta. Now, this goes to your greater answer to your question and the final part of it here over the next minute, painted this way, John, for the Alberta independence movement, right? Everybody wants to see people vote for their own freedom rather than it being done for them, right? It's not a drive-through window, which is where everybody's gotten used to coming up, take your order, please, instant gratification, off you go, and about your day. I want freedom, I want justice, I want that, and then, or I don't want this, and I want to protest peacefully against ICE, which they said is okay unless you start attacking them. But they're saying we want to see people vote for their independence, vote for their sovereignty, vote for their freedom. And they had 62,500 plus signatures last week in 1 week alone in a province with the numbers of the immigrant invasion since 2015 at roughly 5 million people. Now, Canada is at 2.27 billion acres. That's a little bit larger than America. So that's the landmass. You bring Greenland into it at over 500 million acres. And you have that massive continent under the Golden Dome control, under a beautiful, brilliant celestial computer running the Golden Dome that is incredibly backed by the America First policy, which sweeps all the way down to Antarctica. So you're controlling both of the poles. And the moment that Alberta goes, it is actually the primary economic engine for the Crown Corporation of Canada. It actually supports 92% of the oil production across Canada. If you take Alberta out of the equation of 4.13 million barrels per day, 4.31 million barrels per day, 2024, out of the 5.1 that all of Canada creates, it's gone. It's the economic engine and the driving force for Canada. Saskatchewan's already said they wanted it. Parts of BC have said that. Parts of the Yukon have already said that. So here's where the extraction comes to play on the fulcrum. I say, and unfortunately, I'm waiting to get back to America, right? And thank you, John, for signing along with, Derek and Michael Jaco, the letter that we sent to President Trump on December 2nd. I appreciate all of your autographs and witness to that. I'm waiting to get back to America, right? Because what did I do? I was so insolent to not get a jab, not get a mask, and some Border Patrol agent went, "You can't do that. You're not American. You have no rights. You need to be vaccinated." And then that was it. I'm no longer persona non grata, as they say on the shows that I've done, the man without a country, as Michael says, right? Both Canada, China, and also in the States. But the moment that happens, you're going to see the immediate, I believe, capitulation for all of the other provinces, because Quebec has wanted to be separate since before it was forced into a facade of a confederation. And that facade, remember, is July 1, 1867, in Washington, D.C., the Canada Crown Corporation was established 4 years before number 19 sold out the United States of America Republic to the British imperialists in the city of London. And once that happens and Alberta goes, and Alberta is a sovereign nation, and it is the North Texas 100%, that immediately brings us into America's good graces from that standpoint. And you're talking to a fellow Albertan right here. So I'm very much excited about everything going on. And then you're going to have everybody else just kind of capitulate, go, geez, we're going to need this too. And I don't think there's any mastard waving a flag that's going to stop it from happening, because it'll be overwhelming when you see zero income taxes, when you see sovereignty for your peace, for your people, your land, your community protected. And then you also know that you've got that walking softly, carrying a big stick type of a treaty going on with the Foxtrot Alpha FO. I think that's what people are going to start screaming for, because we have it worse in Venezuela than America does right now. And once the media gets after that ball, and the truth media, it's game over. I feel it's 1 year away. I wish it was a lot sooner, John, but I feel it's 1 year away. Maybe Sheila has some information from her sources, though.
Okay, well, thank you, Brad. Just want to say, what we're doing here, big 140,000-foot view, is we're freeing the world one country at a time. That's what's taking place, folks, and this will go on for decades, and it's a good thing, and it's an amazing time for all of us to be here. And the question people have to ask themselves when they look in the mirror is, what have I done to contribute to this course correction for humanity? Do something. Anyway, Sheila, thanks for being patient, and go any way you choose off the heels of what Brad was discussing, but also please comment on the president's statement at Davos about, we caught them, treason, execution, which he said before, as well as prosecutions coming soon. What do you see happening with that circumstance?
Well, I don't know if a lot of Americans really understand those were acts of war. 2020 were acts of war by even our allies, some of our Five Eyes. And so these acts of war are going to be dealt with. But to back up to that, there was a glorious thing that happened. And I don't know if people understand, they don't understand this Secretary of War. How did this happen? It's supposed to be Secretary of Defense. We've been defending all over the world on the other side of the world. We've been taking care of that hemisphere, and everything's been ignored in this hemisphere. And our guys have been fighting all these battles over there, and we've been vulnerable here. So there's a few things. What Brad was mentioning about Canada originally, a lot of Americans don't understand Canada was supposed to be part of America. And what a lot of people in Canada and America don't understand is we've always been controlled by England. It wasn't just the corporation. We've never been free. We've never been independent until President Trump. And in calling it the 51st state, he's already positioned it. By him sitting with the Betsy Ross flag and making notations about it, he's already made his comment. When he was at the meeting in Canada that he had to be pulled away from, this is a few months ago now, when he was in that meeting, he was wearing a pin, and it had the American flag, and on the other side had the Canadian flag on the same pin. One was swinging up one direction, one was swinging up the other. And he had a 51st on the other lapel. So he was making the message, he's coding all the time. But by bringing us back to Department of War, people don't realize this. We were originally Department of War. We were not Department of Defense. War means you're ready and you are going to protect your own people. Department of Defense, we've been sent all over the world to take care of them. So what was really amazing about Davos and the preparation for that was in going to Secretary of War. Why? What Derek was mentioning about Fauci at Georgetown. I experienced the bioweapon targeting at a Linwood event. I was in bed for 6 months. A lot of people don't know the details. I don't focus on it. But because I didn't go to hospital, the other 5 speakers all did and died within a month. I lost 20 truth-speaking friends between July and December of 21 because of that bioweapon. But because I've lived, I found a patent. And this is the other side of it, Derek. The patent came out on 1/10 of 2017. It was 1/11 2017 when Fauci was at Georgetown saying, our new president's going to be dealing with a highly infectious disease soon, and he was letting them know. Now, what's crazy about this? This goes all the way back to our founding years, and that is that our government holds a % interest in that crazy U.S. patent of a bioweapon to take us out. Our government holds a % interest. And that's what Jefferson and Adams were taken out for on our 50th anniversary, because Jefferson fought it from the beginning. The centralized bank started in 1791. And in 1791, Secretary Hamilton started at Philadelphia, and it went all the way from New York down to Savannah, Georgia within months. That was 1791. We were only after an inauguration of Washington in 1789. So there's been no freedom in any of this. And going from a defense mode to a war mode keeps us protected. It's a completely different environment. So here we go. Now back to, you wanted to mention about Davos. So WHO, all of this was known. They were all involved in it. It's a US patent now to create this bioweapon to take us out. The bioweapon has 19 ingredients in it, and it's CV19, and 19 is the power number of the other kingdom. 20 is recycle unto death. And every generation, every century, going all the way back. I'm as far back as the 1300s. I can't find anything in writing in the 1200s. There was a pandemic every 20 year in every century since the 1300s. The one 100 years ago was not from Spain, was not the flu. It was the H1N1 virus, and that's on the CDC website in their archive section. So what we've been battling, and then when they wore masks, they died of bacterial pneumonia. So our president made it a quick thing where he said the following words that people have forgotten. He said, we're going to have this vaccine, we're going to develop it. And how many times did he bring his military guys out on the platform? And he said, when it is ready, our military will distribute it, because our military is the best at distributing something like this. And he brought the guys out that were going to be distributing it. Did you ever see anyone in the military distribute anything about a vaccine? Never. So that they were being distributed and they were doing experimental and they were saying that it was forced to the people was all incorrect. And the reason the president did it fast, because he lost his grandfather while he was walking his father that day, came home, felt a little woozy, laid down, died, bacterial pneumonia. Why? Wearing a mask. He didn't want the children to have to be wearing the mask because he knew we were going to lose people dropping on the street like they did 100 years ago. So this is where we are in this whole situation. Now that's a lead up in order to get to WHO, WEF, and I'm going to lean into League of Nations, UN, and also NATO. A lot of people don't realize when he first came in, he made all of the other nations belly up to the situation that they weren't paying anything. So Americans were paying the whole bill. So now we've narrowed it down, but we're still paying over 70%. And what's happening? They're bombing the other side of the world, and we're paying to rebuild it. And back in 2001 to 3, that being us bombing Iraq, and then we went and rebuilt it. In Afghanistan, and we rebuild it. We rebuild their communities, but not ours. So here's what's changed. This hemisphere is going to be the focus. And that's why he is adjusting everything. When he set up the peace board, there is nothing better than that. And he made sure it was done and completed and right in their face. He made sure that they understood about the WEF. You don't have the currency and censorship control over all the currencies and finances around the world. And WHO, you don't have anything to do with what we're going to do in our medical area, because we're going to clean all of this up. He made it so clear. And to me, he's already out of WHO. He's already out of WEF. He's completely restructured NATO in having this peace board. And that takes care of NATO, because why are we paying 70% to keep, sending our guys over and losing lives from our people on the Western Hemisphere to send them over there to be killed? And then we pay to rebuild everything. Why has this been going on? And it never was going to stop. Remember that famous Zelensky day when it was 40 minutes into that speech, and then J.D. Vance came in and Zelensky said he made him mad? Well, Zelensky didn't understand. J.D. Vance was asking the exact in order to what? Do the first audit of what was going over to Ukraine from our coffers, our taxes here in America. So all of that started a whole new situation. So what did Zelensky do? And all these pictures are in the new book, because it was such a fantastic time to get it in the book, is that Zelensky then didn't understand that he wasn't operating properly with us. And then the Sun Tzu quote matches that when you have a leader that will do anything in order to be the leader, he will absolutely burn down his own country, kill his own people. And that's exactly what's been happening in the Ukraine. So the president has already prepared everything before he went to Davos. And I think this is true, that he wasn't there last year. And this was his time to put all this together. And that's why when people say, I don't know that much is happening, they need to go and listen to the speech and listen to everything he did. And then when Caroline Levitt came out and did the final conclusion, and that everybody had signed, and they're already on this board, and we're all going for peace, and we're not going to be dealing with these organizations anymore. Now let's go back in time. If you go back to right around 2007, when they were doing the horrific rebuilding of the UN building in New York, President Trump was on with C-SPAN, and it was in the middle of the night. I was writing something, another business book, and I tuned in, and there he was in a private room meeting with a couple of the people. Did you know American public never knew that our Congress paid for all of this? the remodeling, when they said that they had to remodel the UN building. And the president made it very clear. He already knew that they were bringing in all this information in the diplomatic pouches, and they all wanted immunity in our country, and they bring huge entourages in, and we're supposed to give all of them immunity no matter what they do on our land. And he said, here's what you need to do. You need to sell that UN building. Any developer can make money on that, pay off all the bills that you've done, because they had some Italian architect. Every month they were redoing the plans, and every month he was getting like $600 million. It was just, this whole thing was just so out of whack. Sorry, $600,000. And then you keep adding that up. And do you know President Trump was almost to the dollar of where he said they were going to be over budget if they didn't stop and change their ways? And they didn't stop and change their ways. And he predicted it, and it was exactly what they were going to end up with. He said, you need that UN connection to be off our shores. Make the money on the building in New York, and those guys need to not have immunity in our country. They can be offshores, and then we're free of that. We're free from the bills because you've made the money on the building. Let a developer make the money on it. You guys need to get out of this business. And so now what has he done? Now all this goes back to Federal Reserve, IRS, League of Nations, and a renegotiation of a contract and treaty with Mexico done by Woodrow Wilson. So when you put all of that together, I mean, the president is layering this. This is such a brilliant, brilliant unfolding of a plan for our future, because all of this was done to us. None of this was part of our Constitution. None of these bureaus were part of the Constitution. The reason why we can't even get the right candidates in the election process is because of Charles Joseph Bonaparte. They came in and set up the whole thing just like they had in Europe. And we don't really get to vote on anybody, because they started the National Municipality League, and that was set up by Bonaparte. He set up the agents of the FBI, the Bureau of Investigation, that then became the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And when he set all of this up, they have their own merit-based system on how they select what? The candidates that get to run for offices. And it says right in their structure, we only get to vote for 4. So President Trump has all of this ammunition that has been used against us. And he knows exactly what they've done to completely destroy us, to bring all of these illegals in, to make all of this happen. He knew all of this was developing. And in his 1 year, less than 1 year, there he is at Davos. There he is, making all of these arrangements. And he already had that peace board all set up. That was one of the brilliant meetings that I have witnessed in the history of all the coordination of all these different nations, because he has gone into and corrected everything in the process of the UN. He's gone in on NATO and corrected all of that. Go back to his speech at UN. Remember when they shut down the elevator and he couldn't take the elevator up to the area where he was going to be speaking, and then they muted his mic so nobody could hear in the entire room. There wasn't anybody who could hear anything he was saying because his mic was completely muted. So they've known that he's going to get these things corrected. And it doesn't matter the battles. It doesn't matter what he's facing. He has come through this in a level that I don't think anyone has witnessed with any other leaders. But now it's the same thing with Greenland. Greenland was announced this week about the Greenland. The Prime Minister of England was stating that Greenland should be controlled and run by the Greenlanders. So President Trump raised back, well, then that would be good if Britain could be run and controlled by Britons. And there's no way they're going to let anybody in Britain have any control. But that's what happened to Canada, is that now they're part of the Commonwealth, New Zealand Commonwealth. And that's why he said 51, 2, and 3. And everybody thought it was going to be Canada. And then they thought maybe Cuba, maybe something else. And then they thought it was going to be Greenland. And so I think it could be, there's interest, but they were part of the Five Eyes that were involved in the election. So that's why I keep saying it doesn't matter how fast this gets done. Everybody says they're impatient. Everybody says they're frustrated. Why is it taking so long? Why are people not being arrested? You're not going to see court-martial and tribunal arrests. And the military accountability letter handled this January 1 of 2024. It came out at 4 a.m., exactly as the moment the Georgia Guidestones were taken down. And that's because 4 is structure in their process. So obliterating the structure of the military structure that is the military industrial complex took place on January 1 of 2024. The next to the last sentence is, we will fight until we have resolved the two-tier justice system. But up in the third paragraph, it's all about the generals, the vice admirals, the rear admirals, the lieutenant colonels, the colonels, all of these flag officers from around the world. And it lists 3 lines, starting with General Milley. And then it says, and many more. Why and many more? Because Pete Hegseth, when they called everybody to Quantico, he said on a recorded video that he shared Sunday before the Tuesday meeting, and before the September 30 meeting. And so when he did that, he was saying, we used to have 6,000 troops for every general. And now, we're barely at 1,400. I mean, so everything had changed, all of these people out there, but nobody knew until the summons went out. Did you know that the British Commonwealth owns most of those, or set up most of those bases all around the world? Those are also the same locations for the CIA. And I went over this with Jaco in a previous interview, and surprised him. Robert David Steele gave a complete description of the 7 CIA. There are 7 completely different, independent, and if you're in one area of the CIA, you don't know about anything in the other 6. And so that brief video I sent to Jaco, and we may cover it the next time we come together for an interview, but we have not understood how deep the evil is. But this evil is what the Pilgrims knew before they came to America. And so they lived with the grooming through the churches and the schools and the structuring. Everything they came to America and did to us had already been done all around the world. And we just weren't aware. But back in the 1800s, nobody traveled more than 5 or 10 miles, but without spending a night, if you took a carriage. I mean, it's just, people don't understand the lack of connectivity back in that time as to how we ended up here. How is it, what happened with Canada? If they were supposed to be part of America, how come they aren't part of America? Britain had this all controlled from the beginning. We were under the control, and I kept saying when they did the corporation, and then they put us back under the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, that's when it happened. Guys, it happened within 24 months, less than 24 months of us being with a president inaugurated in 1789. That's how fast this happened in America. So the takeover before we were self-governing is what we're dealing with. And everything goes back to that. How dare the government have a % interest in a bioweapon to target its own people? No, that is completely against our Constitution. That centralized banks, the government held a % interest, and that's what Jefferson said. You cannot do this. And he said, once there's an evil, then the republic is corrupted, and you cannot just try and fix that evil or replace that evil. You have to do exactly what President Trump and our Department of War are doing right now.
What a brilliant analysis and dot connecting from so many perspectives throughout history. Thank you for that. And, quick comment, Robert David Steele is sorely missed. We could certainly use him today. And the footage that's out there, some people are posting, is well worth circulating around. That gentleman was spot on. Had the opportunity to talk with him several times on camera and off camera. Anyway, also one comment about the UN building. Let's just all envision them getting thrown out of there at some point in the near future and turning it into a Trump Tower just for fun. I would like to see that happen. Let me take this next question. Sheila's already covered the Board of Peace. Let's go around the panel with the other 3 members. Just briefly, give us your analysis of the Board of Peace. What is the president really doing from your perspective with this? And what do you think the full effect will be a little bit down the line? Because he moved as you said, Sheila, it had been well planned out. But once it was released, it just moved very, very quickly. In fact, Cambodia just came in with their $1 billion to be a part of it. Mike, if you want to comment on the Board of Peace, we'll be brief on this because I got 2 more questions I want to get to before we wrap up the show. So take it away, Michael.
Yeah, the Board of Peace, basically, Russia said, yeah, we'll come in. You just need to unfreeze, some of the money you guys froze, and you can take $1 billion and we'll be part of it. So it is, of course, Russia is involved with Ukraine very heavily, and I think they're doing a good job of taking out a lot of those Nazis. So I'm good with that. one of the questions we're going to deal with in a little bit, the Nazi seem to have a little help with their technology. So I think that this is going to move in the right direction. If you're having everybody talk about peace and work on peace and have technologies that help each other and have free trade and so forth, like between each other, like we've seen in the distant past where we didn't have any conflict. Tartaria, I've looked at that very deeply. I think we have the same situation that's coming up again. Those technologies were blocked, eliminated, extinguished, and so forth. They'll come back. America has all these technologies. We're ready to unleash them. We just need peace in the world to do that, because if we give it to the bad guys, they'll use it for evil purposes. So the peace initiative is definitely something that's going to make a major impact. It's going to go forward. It will evolve into something much greater, and it will take over the world and shut down the war machine. I mean, we've seen war completely stop in the near term, because we had COVID-19. There was no war during COVID-19. How about that? So we can do this. It's very easy. We just have to shut down like they did. All of our industries, all of our, lock us away in our homes and so forth. They need to be locked away. And once that happens, then there won't be any more wars. So the peace initiative is definitely going to be amazing.
Yes, and it's one big surprise to me once I started to hear that term, and I'm amazed how quickly countries are coming aboard into this. I believe it's unstoppable, and what a wonderful thing to actually have an initiative collectively throughout countries in the world for peace versus what the United Nations and other entities have done over these decades. Derek, Board of Peace, anything you'd like to contribute?
Well, I'm always going to go back. I always keep it pretty steady and handy right here, but this whole thing is an operation. Like every aspect that we keep talking about, it sounds like a broken record, but it's a beautiful broken record. So it didn't come together fast and happen fast. That was strategically planned back here, and then what people are watching is that what the target audience is seeing. It's real time to them. But if you're a patriot or you read and studied everything that's been put together for you, it's not real time. That's why it looks so fast and rapid. I mean, 2017 and 2018, 2019, the capitulations then, those are those leaders now, right? That's when the real action took place. Talking about Obama, going back to Obama, when the real election was, the coup and all that was 2016. And I know it's hard for people to comprehend, but there was no other way that President Trump could have pulled this off as a president, as just a regular Donald J. Trump. There's no way whatsoever. So all of it. Now, Hyundai, a buddy of mine that really should be on these shows too sometimes, even though he's not military, but he's defense contract back before President Trump kept that promise. But he's a good guy. With the Doomsday plane. And, he sent me a text the other day, and it's a Hyundai commercial. And they're driving, and it's just like action, looks like a movie, and then they swirl around, and then the guy takes his mask off, and he goes, "I am the villain." And then the guy goes, "I knew it was you," like that. So, and the voice narration is the guy who played in Ozark, right, which was a money cartel trafficking, right? So they're showing people. And Melania, right, the movie coming out this Friday, right? All these things. Then the Emmys or whatever that was the other day, when opening line, she said, haven't made a movie in 5 to 6 years, right? So all these things are tying in. President Trump 4 years ago, Memorial Day 2025 and July the 4th, 2026. He was like, that will be the golden age, and moving it. Golden age to me will not be still tyranny. People, even me, I give libtards grief on X because they're fun to mess with. But in the depth, I don't want to argue with anybody. We, veterans especially, we're the ones who you really should want in your back pocket, because we don't care what you live like, who you marry, We don't care about that, right? Because we know how to live and let live. We know how to integrate. We know how to tell jokes. And Jaco and Brad, we know this more than anybody. The more they told us to not do things joke wise and saying certain things, the more we did it, because that's what created that camaraderie. That's what created the tension breakup, right? Was to say things about your mama or your daddy or whatever it was like that. But you knew when someone was really having a bad day in the military and you didn't push their buttons too much. You know when someone's really there. So President Trump, this peace thing, the liberals right now can't see it because they're liberals, right? But this whole thing's been pre-planned. Everything is destruction of all the deep state, all these executive orders, Yemen. See, that's the one thing you can get them with. They know Iran, right? They know Ukraine, but they don't ever talk about Yemen. That's one of those outliers you could take and say, how come you guys weren't losing your minds last March when we were bombing Yemen, right? No one was doing that because they didn't know about it. They weren't told to get mad about it. And as Jaco alluded to with Ukraine and Russia, this whole thing, first off, Ukraine's not a part of NATO. All right, so Article 5 don't apply. So why was Joe Biden the whole time talking about Article 5 in all the debates of NATO? So see, there's a lot of things that tie into that, right? And then Brad was talking about J.P. Morgan and Chase and all that. And they made Kamala, there were two people, she said specifically, two people during her debate. She used President Trump's Wharton School of Finance as her reference, and then she used the J.P. Morgan or one of those. And I'm like, those the most, SEC.gov, the most penalties out of anybody. So there's all these things are tie-ins to show you that this whole thing is a massive. And then it's going to lead to Obama, President Trump's post. I just screenshot that again when he did this. I think it was March last year. All roads lead to Obama. Read truth if you want to see military tribunals, right? Well, to me, what I've been trying to explain to people, talking about peace and talking about how you integrate all this, how you bring it to a quell where people aren't just arguing and bickering all the time, is Jaco and Brad, we talk about this all the time. You got to infiltrate from within. And Jaco, boy, he and I, early days, man, we took a pounding from people, didn't we, in the comment boxes? People were just like, "Oh, Jaco, you CIA, how you this and that." And I'm like, I'm like, look, people, President Trump straight out the gate, 2017 said, follow the money. And then he said, not everybody in these three-letter agencies are bad. It's a senior level leadership. Right? Well, all that's been taken out. All that's been wiped out. Now we're down to the little granules on the bottom. But Jaco and I took a pounding on certain things like that because we're trying to say, look, you only know the names that you think you know, right? And what you've been told and what you've Googled and what you found on a .net or a .org or something like that. We're talking about strategy here. We're talking about how you get in, how you blend in. And Jaco, of all people, this man right here, he's one of many and his brothers. But you talking about blending in. And then Jaco could go into great detail of the strategies of blending in and how you keep calm and how you keep pressure. You got to do that. Then you got to get to a safe zone and not be followed. There's so many things that you could get into, but it's on the bigger picture, 140,000 foot, the infiltration from within. You make it implode from within, right? And then you find out who's on your side. Well, there's a way to know that. Jaco and I and Brad and I, military people, you can know by skill sets who is and who isn't, because there's certain things that you can tell, like intricately, who is and who ain't once you get to certain levels of your career and experience and how long you've been doing it, et cetera. Right? So this whole thing happened way back. And so what you're seeing now is the rollout of that, getting into what President Trump, his 80th birthday will be in June. So keep that in mind. People need to remember that 80th, your 80s are your hard years. Like that's when most people pass away. Let's just be honest. It's their hard years. Not many people make it to their 90s. So President Trump deserves the face that he put on this, his name, his face. He is smart. I'm not taking away from that. He is genius, but he's one of many. But he deserves that peace, right? He deserves that. Hey, Mount Rushmore. Really, I make excuses. Say, hey, you don't need to be on Mount Rushmore. There's a mountain on the other side of Mount Rushmore that he needs to be on solely by himself, not on Rushmore. But he deserves that. And so many people right now, especially on the liberal side, but Rhino side, they can't see that. But this whole thing was for that. This whole thing was to bring a quellness to everybody and say, look, our founders, they separated religion, they separated church and state, they separated certain things because they knew you couldn't ever use that as a catalyst for your stance either, right? Because then people would always be a holier than thou, etc. So this whole thing for President Trump, it's not about him. It's about the militaries bringing everybody home. When he says America first, that also means Thailand first, New Zealand first, Australia first, et cetera. It doesn't just mean America first. But we had the lead because we were the ones who were entrenched in all this and ingrained in all this. And so, it's exciting from another standpoint because of my grandfather and people that I, didn't serve with, obviously, but that taught me these values and etc. And my grandfather was one of them specifically. He hated war. He was all right with it if it was unnecessary, but he hated it because so many people made excuses as a first option versus, hey, we'll kick your butt if we have to, but. And so talking about what we're talking about, Department of Defense, we have been in so many nations that we should have never been a part of whatsoever. And it's alluding to the money straight out the gate because all President Trump had to do was invoke certain executive orders and then enforce them to their full extent. So it's exciting, and I don't think we're headed to a long-term thing. I was just reading the agency strategy that Marco Rubio is on for 2026 to 2030, and it's still talking a lot about the global strategy, the foreign entities, and getting away from those things. But the Indo-Pacific Agreement back in 2019, there's a lot of things people can go read to kind of get in ahead of that, to show you that this whole thing's been planned from the get-go. And I think that July 4th, 2026, in order for it to be what President Trump said, we got to be somewhere in a revealing portion and talking about imploding from within. This is where some Christians struggle, and I'm a Christian, but I'm not one that just, I'm not a Bible thumper, but I'm a Christian, so I want people to know that. But, a lot of Christians struggle with the imploding from within because they think that once you're a bad person, that you're damned to hell. Well, you may be, but some people have a guilty conscience, right? A moral conscience, a guilty conscience, and they could be completely evil, but they may be the very ones that can pull in everything. And I think that's what President Trump means by all roads lead to Obama. I think that Obama, yes, he most certainly was Barry Soros. I mean, we got all that. We know that. But he was still a puppet. He was still controlled. He was controlled by money. And the Law of War Manual talks about relevancy, and it talks about certain things. But he may have been, it's like President Trump issued Executive Order 13977 a few days before 2021, a protection order for judges, attorneys, and prosecutors, right? Because until you're back here, until you have a gun on you, you don't really know what you will do, right? You don't really know what you do. People say all the time, I do this. No, you don't know what you would do when you're back here. No one can see you, and someone's got a gun on you telling you what you're going to do, what you're going to say, how you're going to do it, where, the who, the how, the where. So when you detain these people, Hillary could have spilled all the beans. Obama could have spilled. They may have taken deals where they're going to tell the whole world on TV, because when you say all roads lead to Obama, Hillary wouldn't be a uniter. People would expect that from her. But when you think about Obama getting on an emergency alert system and all eyes are on him and all eyes around the world, all TVs, all internet, all phones, all everything, there's a way to bring peace like nobody's ever seen before. And I think that they're all in it from that aspect. There's going to be some key players that people do not expect who are going to be the key components that brings it all together for the other side. I cannot liberate President Trump. Jaco can't. No general can. No admiral can, because the liberals, the ones who are fighting us, ignorantly fighting us, those are the ones who have to be quelled, right? So how do you quell them? With one of their own, a bunch of their own. And I think that's going to come down to some kind of showdown like that. And I think there's going to be some kind of mass, revelations. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be theatrical. I think that's the peace board that's going to come about in more of a General Assembly type setting.
I think the American people would love to see that latter part of what you said unfold. I want to pedal back real quick to President Trump getting his own mountain, if you will, adjacent to Rushmore. You know, a lot of folks say today, and I have over the years, that President Trump may very well be one of the best and greatest presidents this nation ever had. And I think when you fast forward to the finish line of his time serving us, I think we can take out some of those words and just simply say the best president this nation and world has ever had. I'd like to move on to one or two more questions. If we can be a little bit brief on these so we don't extend everybody's time here. But I want to just say the destruction, we're going to go to the top with Michael because Sheila already opened up the Board of Peace discussion. Actually, I didn't have you weigh in on that, Brad. I wanted to get everyone to weigh in on the Board of Peace. Please weigh in on that. And then I want to move us into two things and we'll wrap up the broadcast.
Sure, I'll be happy to, John. You can hear me okay? Great.
Oh, yeah, everything's fine.
All right, thanks. So the Board of Peace, I think, is really key for everybody to notice. And I'm doing a little bit of research on it when it came out. You look at the United Nations and you look at their X account, they do not follow the Board of Peace. And on the X account for Board of Peace, which just launched January 2022, or 22nd rather, it was 22, they do not follow the United Nations. And let me just read this very first opening sentence in the preamble for the Board of Peace. It reads this: declaring that durable peace requires pragmatic judgment, common sense solutions, and the courage to depart from approaches and institutions that have too often failed. And the chairman of the Board of Peace is Donald John Trump, not president. And the chairman of the Board of Peace is in personam, not by a state authorization as president or the wartime commander in chief. And the chairman, the person, the man, Donald John Trump, until he so chooses to remove himself as the chairman of the Board of Peace, he has the veto power on the Board of Peace.
Wow.
So all of the nations who are, you come to the poker table and it's $1 billion ante. And Vietnam just joined while we're doing this broadcast. So the Republic of Vietnam just put in $1 billion and is now publicly acknowledged. And I think that calm is powerful when you say the United Nations does not follow the Board of Peace. I haven't seen in my research it retweet, whatever we call the X thing now, retweet, resharing. Board of Peace, I haven't seen them post anything regarding President Trump's speech about the Board of Peace. Of course, that was the biggest news around the world. And you're bringing these players to the table. So this is to supplant the UN.
Yes. Excellent. All right.
Great
So I'm
time
going to
to
move
be alive.
to Michael Jaco. Thank you. Incredible times and incredible moves being made. The destruction of the satanic, demonic, tyrannical financial system, that dirty, fake, phony fiat money that's been sliding through our hands for decades, that stuff, that has made us debt slaves. That whole situation is coming to an end right before our very eyes. And to me, it is very evident that the Federal Reserve and the IRS are being dismantled step by step, paving the way for a U.S. Treasury issued sound money per the U.S. Constitution en route to a stable coin, en route to the QFS and so forth. Now, we also have the declining U.S. dollar. I think it dropped to 97 on the dollar index, a matter of days ago, maybe bumped up a little bit. I don't know, but it is declining. It has worst year in many years, and that's by orchestrated design by the enemies of freedom. And so the declining U.S. dollar, and according to 107, he just on Eyes on Gitmo, it's another show I produce monthly. We just had an episode, it was published a day or two ago, and Juan in that episode, so I state that because it's current, did not deviate from his statement a year and a half ago, where he said the U.S. dollar will have a near-death experience. He's still on the record for that, and also on the record that the war itself, we still got a long way to go, folks. But back to the economy, I'm setting up a long-winded statement here to get these questions answered in a moment. So Juan Osama is on record, near-death experience for the dollar, and we see that going in the wrong direction. But what I'd like this panel to weigh in on, we'll start with Michael Jaco, is to weigh in on just what you see going on right now at the central bank. When you peel that curtain back, it's almost lights out for these guys. They are panicking because of the manipulation that they've done of God's money, gold and silver, for decades. So, Michael, if you want to take on that, what do you see taking place in this encapsulated situation of the Federal Reserve, the IRS, and the central bank system? What's the hammer of hell's coming down on them right now? What do you see taking place? And why is it impacting silver and gold in such an incredibly powerful way?
Yeah, I can answer that really quick. You want to, we forgot Sheila on the Board of Peace. You want to let her weigh in a little bit real quick?
She actually opened up the Board of Peace, but if you'd like to comment on the Board of Peace additionally. One moment, Michael, since you invoked that, I don't want to leave Sheila hanging there. Sheila, did you want to comment any further on the Board of Peace? Because I'm sure you have other things you might like to add.
I think on other topics as we go on now, because the reason why I brought it up and that Caroline got all the signatures, and you are so right that all of this was all set up long ago. It goes to me, it goes back to the red files that were taken back in 2017 on the capitulation tour with all the countries and the miraculous things that happened. And I think it was confirmed when he did England and proved that Buckingham Palace is not open. He was at Windsor. That broke the back of the financial to me, because when he came home, that was the first time that he said, I'm meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu regarding the state of Israel. And the state of Israel is the Inc. Registered in London, England. So what has happened now is he's brought it all the way. And so that's why I think I said everything, is that Caroline Lovett, when she had, she ended up having everything where everybody signed. It was a done deal, and it completely obliterates UN. It obliterates NATO and the structuring of that. And he's already set up the Western Hemisphere. All these other leaders, and the main thing that people don't understand perhaps yet is that they don't understand that every country has been treated this same way. Every country has been taken down to its knees. Every country has gone through all of these horrific things by these people who've been controlling. So where we're at right now is nobody's going to put up with it anymore. It's over. I think game over. And I think it's a major checkmate as to exactly where we are. And it goes back to what was in his safe when they were at Mar-a-Lago, where they opened the safe and the Queen was laying down and a little sign that said checkmate.
Excellent. Well, checkmate is here, and it's a great time to be here. Michael, thanks for reminding me of that. Sheila, commenting on that. To pick up the issue on the economy, if you still got that in your head there.
Yeah, that's definitely. I mean, the Board of Peace is going to happen when the follow the money gets basically taken away from the deep state. We're seeing that happen very quickly. Yesterday we saw the silver price, just like it. Dollar went down massively. Silver went up after trading stopped, and silver got knocked down again. I think the banksters are on their last days of being able to manipulate the silver price. Silver price bounced pretty good today again. It's going to continue to go up. I think silver is going to be unbelievable going forward. We'll probably see $250 silver middle of the year. We'll probably see $7,500 gold, and then it'll just keep going up because once we hit that one beautiful July 4th date, probably President Trump is going to go, okay, now we're going to tie, Treasury to the gold, and that goes. So the fiat currency that the Federal Reserve puts out is not the American people's money. That's the banksters' money. And we have to take that down so that we can have peace, because they're the ones that are creating the war. Obviously we had, like I said, COVID-19, and there was no war. So it's very easy to stop these wars. We take away their power, the war stops. We have peace, and we have money for everyone because they have been hiding that money from us. President Trump has been getting that money back for us and ready to distribute it. And if you're an American citizen, you're going to get it. If you're Zimbabwe citizen. You go back to your country and you're going to get, Zimbabwe money. And it's going to be, incredible around the world because there's incredible amounts of money out there for the world. And it's going to be beautiful. There's no problems once everybody has, the economic, wherewithal to take care of themselves, their families, and so forth. That's one of the things that starts these wars. So peace will come with economic security for all.
Absolutely. And, we've covered a lot of different topics in this discussion, and this is the good news story. And there was good news throughout the broadcast, but this is really, really important, and it was very well said. And um, yeah, so many areas I can get into with that, but we'll just take that same question over to Derek Johnson. Federal Reserve, IRS, central bank panicking, silver and gold, God's money exploding through the roof. What's your take on what you see happening there?
Well, it's just what we've been talking about. It's a takedown of the hijacking of, United States of America, whether you call it that or not. Before then, I mean, that's up for debate, but we can really home in on 1867, 1868, 1871, 1874, 1878. There's a lot of key things in that. Then moving to 1913, income tax, and then reserve. 29, people forget about the stock market crashing right after that, quote unquote. Then President Trump has alluded to FDR and the New Deal. And then when he said it was short and concise what he said, but what he said was basically that was all a crock of, right? That my grandparents and different people bought into, put their money into it, etc. And that was so I love bringing this story up. When I did my master's degree at corporate, USA, right? When I did my master's degree at Colorado State, one of my advanced classes, professor held up a dollar bill. He said, "What is this?" And he was like, "No wrong answer, but there's one great answer if someone gets around it." And I have this buddy, and it's excellent that it was him that got it. But he was always a smart aleck because in the right kind of context. But he would hold his arm up like this, always like this backwards, and he would lean over just like that because he always had a response every time any professor said anything, and they wouldn't call on him just because he was normally correct, but everybody said, "Oh, what they said," and professor kept shaking his head no. And finally, he had his arm like that. You could really blurt it out, but he had his arm up, and he was like, and he said, "Control." Bingo. And so many people don't apply. It's just like kind of being born, right? We come into the world. We know that you chew, you swallow, right? You eat, you drink, you eat. But people who have had strokes, who lose their motor skills, they have to go through speech pathology and learn how to chew, learn how to swallow, learn that mechanism, right? And people forget about that on a daily, right? They forget about what creates their life they're living. They forget about that, and everything revolves around that control, that dollar, right? And then you get one step further into when we left the gold standard, which Jaco and Brad, and I don't know about Sheila, but I'll speak on them. They know more about the gold and silver intricately and in depthly than I do, for speaking terms. But you still can go back to living the gold standard. I have a buddy who was special operations. He actually came from Australia to get his citizenship to the U.S. He went through the Army, went special operations. Rest is history. And I learned this from him, even though he don't want his name out there, but he knows who he is. But I like to give credit where it's due. And also at Colorado State University at that time. But he was much older. And at that time, and we would sit and talk about the Constitution, the Federalist Papers, Common Sense by Thomas Paine, and all of our foundation. And then he said there's three fundamental things that changed America. Three. And the Civil Rights Act was one of them, the Unified Budget Act, and then leaving the gold standard. And so the gold standard and the unified budget kind of go together, right? And so that's what we talked about in 68. And then you had the Nixon shock of 71, but that people don't realize that's Congress did this. They made the dollar as valuable as they want or invaluable. We call that inflation and deflation. And that's ultimately control. And that's what creates that division. Chaos plus division equals power acquisition, right? And that's how they've been able to control these pockets, right? And then it goes to that bigger picture, which is why it was important to mention earlier by Sheila about, President Trump not taking a salary. It's very important. It's also important because it's coded as well. 28 U.S. Code, Section 3002, United States Federal Corporation. I tell people all the time, people say, well, if we're a corporation, why are you quoting codes? I'm like, well, in order to decode something, you need the what? You need the codes, right? That's how you reverse the system, right? You use that against them. And that's what President Trump, they're doing. They're using their own system against them, right? That's why it's hilarious. Like I tell people, when you hear retaliation, that's what you want. When you hear the holier than thou rhetoric, the gaslighting and manipulation, that's what you want, because that means they've been exposed, right? So when they say President Trump did this, that, but they're saying it real agitatedly, and they say, no, it's because they've been exposed. And President Trump, straight out the gate, follow the money. Straight out the gate, follow the money, follow the money, follow the money, follow the money. Now, it's all strategically planned, but it's kind of like Minnesota. President Trump posted just a couple weeks ago, a week and a half ago, whenever it was, follow the money. Look where the money is. So it's that giant light. And it's kind of like us cowboys, country boys. We have a saying called torching the barn, killing the rats. All right. Well, when you expose creatures that typically move at night, and that light shining on them, they run frantically and they just go everywhere. Roaches do it, mice do it, rats do it. And so that's what's taking place. And it's awesome on our side because that's exactly what you want to see. And you want to see them saying and pointing fingers back, right? But at the end of the day, who has the goods? The commanders do, and the supreme commander of the world does. That's why he's been able to go to all these places and do what he's done and say what he's done. And then other people bought into that and bought into what it's going to look like in the future. And then also apply that President Trump, again, can't be bought. I mean, that's one thing people don't really think about. The guy could fly anywhere he wanted to fly, go anywhere he wanted to go. He has his own resorts, first off, but he could go to any other resort in the world. His children's children will not be able to spend all their money. And I think this is kind of funny. I finally got to go ahead to say that I got to sit with Barry and Trump 2 years ago at Mar-a-Lago for about 4 hours. And you talked about making you feel guilty in a good way. It's just a great check for anybody to hear this. But Barron was talking about how it's funny hearing him talk about President Trump as dad. He goes, yeah, dad only let me have one pair of tennis shoes. And I'm sitting there thinking, I got like 40 pair of tennis shoes. But see, that's a mentality that people will not be able to understand. The people out there in that new generation, they think that's absurd. They think that's barbaric. They think that's traditional. They think that's overboard. And I'm like, you're not looking at it this way. It's that's what creates wealth. That's why they will never spend all their money, is because they know how to live. They're content with their life. They don't need things that dissipate or you can go get at any time, especially with Amazon and things that we have, right? So the world's going into a whole new onlook anyways. Right. So that's, if people could take a little bit of nuggets out of all this and think about it from that aspect, not so much as that, what it's going to look like, but it's in great hands. And then also President Trump, the PALs, public alert unregistered soliciting entities. It's an SEC term. So that's been used for multiple times, and the freezing of the assets, the tariffs. Tariffs are an emergency. Again, they're in a national emergency. They are for a defense system, and President Trump has said this, and that also validates the operation. But President Trump has said this in a post that we're using them in defense, and if people just go read a national emergency, what it does. So the tariffs are all strategic, and then also they're presidential. The trade acts of 62 and 74. People go read those and tie it all in. I mean, it's real simple to see what's been done, but I can understand that people's, kind of scared moving into the future. What is that going to look like? And so the safeguard of that, with the whole people at one point about 3 years ago were pulling their money out of the bank real quick, 401ks and everything, and that can create pandemonium in the wrong kind of way too. So I'm reluctant sometimes to speak because there's a lot of fraud accounts out there already and scams that use my face. They're already using AI videos of me with the QFS and all these other things. But if people would go study the quantum initiative, that's the biggest thing people need to really focus on is what quantum actually is from a grand scheme. Now it's going to press your strategic and critical thinking because it's a whole other world. Physics and all kinds of other things that all tie together, and it's a whole other planet. But if people would go read that kind of that 40,000 foot view again, and then work your way down to what President Trump has said and what he's used strategically, then it'll make a little bit more sense. But so many people, especially Christians, they're this is a sensitive subject for them because this is New World Order. You guys keep painting it to be pretty, but this is New World Order. That's the one world system. I'm like, well, if it was, what are you doing about it? Nothing. You're still whining and complaining and hiding in your household. So there comes the tough guy talk where, okay, if it was that, you're still not doing anything. But I don't see it as that. I think that all of our technology, as Jaco was talking about, our technology, some people are afraid of AI. I'm not a technology guy, period. Personally, I don't love it. It's not something I just love. But at the same time, the people that do, the more we dominate in it, the enemy won't. And the more we do, and once it becomes a normal and a natural, then it's going to kind of like, be like anything else when they legalized drinking alcohol. Once you legalize something, people don't care anymore because it's not illegal. It's not, you don't have this rush of doing something you're not supposed to be doing. And I think the same thing with AI. I think once people grasp that, if it's not for you, great, but it's for some people. And those people who dominate are going to keep the enemy from dominating and keep you safe ultimately. And it's the same thing with this monetary system. As long as you stay in the preventive, like we were talking about earlier, the preventive meaning you're studying and reading what you're supposed to be knowing and being involved, then you can prevent anything from escalating in the future because you'll have those skill sets. So I'm probably the not the right person to be talking about intricately on the functions of it, but I think I am from the preventive side to keep people from being scared, and being, because people who are scared are also not going to help either, right? Because everybody does have to be involved. Everybody does need to know what they need to know. Same thing with America, knowing what you're supposed to know, your civic rights, your civil roles, your civil duties. But Brad and Jaco, and maybe Sheila, but Brad and Jaco for sure, that they're the two guys I know that know about the silver and the gold intricately on the market side of things.
Well, you raised some good points, Derek, and I want to pedal back to that light you were talking about in the barn, where the rats and roaches go running for the hills when the lights come on. I'll make that metaphor or analogy and flip it over to what's happening here for 8 billion of us. God's light is shining now pretty brightly everywhere, and there's no place for them to go. Those rats are running, and there's nowhere to go. Trapped, as Sheila said before, checkmate. And that's about where we're finding ourselves. I want to refocus Brad and then Sheila on the economy issue. I'll say this. The Federal Reserve, I mean, if you think about it, they got 200 board of governors and whatever, we know it's not a government agency. We know all the sound bites. Okay, we know that the Great American Coup of 1913 took place when Woodrow Wilson signed this bill into act, and so forth. Of course, later regretted it in his memoirs. Having said all that, what does the Federal Reserve do? They do four things as far as the last time I checked. They raise and lower interest rates. They increase and decrease the money supply, all for the betterment of themselves, their cronies, the big club that George Carlin told us that we're not in. They take care of them by those four moves they make, taking our economy and our life down. Taxes, inflation doesn't have to exist. And we can see the president is telling us that. No more federal income tax. We don't need it. Okay. President's telling us, well, I'll say this. This is not from the president, but inflation, while inflation is a natural occurrence, as I understand, with the ebb and flow of an economy and can be healthy, low levels of inflation on commodity or something of the sort. But the inflation we've experienced our whole life was created by design deliberately to go along with the taxation to keep us debt slaves and with scarcity versus abundance that God intended for us. And dare I say this, we can have debates about the quantum financial system, as Derek just mentioned a moment ago. A lot of people saying, "Hey, that's the mark of the beast. That's the new world order on steroids. Why are you guys falling for it?" While I understand people can have that viewpoint, I don't agree with it. But one day we'll have debates. Right now, it's not time to debate. It's time to unite until we completely finish this war. But I will just simply shut off myself here at the moment and go to Brad Wozny. Federal Reserve, silver, God's money, everything that's happening. The central banks are panicking. One last thing I will say is my understanding that come March, which is just around the corner, these central banks got billions and billions and billions of more dollars that are coming due on their fraudulent paper contracts, and they got no silver in the vaults to protect it. I think it's game over pretty soon. Brad, I know I saw you on a few clips of your broadcasts out there. You seem to know quite a bit about this. Please unload it here.
I think part of the premise, if I was looking at this from a movie standpoint, and I've only had a little background in movies and TV and film, is you're seeing Jassara roll out. And it is absolute. War and prosperity are diametrically opposed to one another. It's antithetical. And what we've known the entire time growing up, we hear about peace, prosperity, peace, prosperity. That mantra, that adage has been repeated across the generations. So what have we just covered? Board of Peace, something that is completely outside of the United Nations doctrine, which we have actually seen as antithetical to the American Constitution, to actually have a sovereign nation. And the way I look at things, being that I'm the Sovereign Soul Show, and sovereignty is paramount because you're outside the legal system, you're in the lawful, you're in supreme law of the land. Supreme law is also divine law, it's also natural law. And when you're there, there's nothing that can usurp that. And so it's up to us as an individual, divine masculine or divine feminine, to carry that forward into our lifestyle, into our community, into our professional workplace, and into our personal lives, and echo that. And from the Jassara standpoint, you look at what President Trump is pulling together. This is the global economic security and reformation of the world. You don't need a piece of paper saying, here's a Jassara Act, that's Board of Peace, or this is what I'm doing over here at NATO, in Greenland, in Canada, and then 52nd, 53rd, take New Zealand, territory of Australia. We already know acting commander-in-chief of Australia, the way that I have been calling him for 4 years, Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bossi, pro tem, I guess. And then from that standpoint too, John, for your audience, and what Michael pointed out right off the bat, is it's freaking amazing what is coming and what is already here, which has already backstopped the fact that you cannot go back to the fiat currency, which is created by the devil, 1913, take it down 1929. Then you have FDR go, you know what, on April 5th, 1933, here's a little executive order. And by law, I want every American here in the Great Depression to turn in all their gold at every Federal Reserve bank or exchange. So it's all set up in the back end. And you have the quantum.gov initiative, the quantum financial system. You have the acknowledgement from Binance to Ripple to the Genius Act that says that you are on a Ripple Rails XRP ledger. It's confirmed back to 2022. Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase are all on it. They're all running on this, even though they were suing them. Hinman and Sendler from the SEC were suing Ripple and Brad Garlinghouse and all those great people up there, right? And David Sachs happens to be from their board being running on this, on the crypto, the administrator of crypto as the czar. So you have the crypto capital of the world, AI capital of the world, which is America. You have JSARA and the National Economic and Security Reformation of America, which is going on. It's inevitable that you're going to have silver hit about $5,890 in the next 5 years. It's inevitable. And you also see that from the supply and the demand constraints. Even though I was brought into honors economics at Wilfrid Laurier University, then in the 90s called the Harvard Business School of the North in Waterloo, Ontario, they didn't teach JSARA. They didn't teach QSIP numbers. So I would encourage every American or Canadian right now, you have a QSIP number, look up what CUSIP stands for, and just plug in your social insurance number or your social security number at Fidelity if you're American or Manulife Financial in Canada, and go see the billions of dollars on at least one of your QSIP numbers that you've been traded on the stock market for as a bond, as an employee of the corporation, which we know is all gone. But we're seeing that happen in real time. Maybe we're not going to get those billions of dollars, but we're going to certainly see an economic welfare for all mankind. And that's what we have right now, John. And the time is incredible. Silver and gold happen to be God's money, and I wouldn't turn my back on God whatsoever.
Good advice. Well said. Thank you very much. Yeah, I wanted to make a quick comment about Charles A. Lindbergh Sr., who was one of the congressmen who voted against the Federal Reserve Act in 1913. And I'm paraphrasing the congressman. And he said, with the passing of this act, it's one of the most worst legislations perpetrated upon the American people. And he said, from now on, and you alluded to this earlier, Brad, that all depressions and recessions will be scientifically engineered. And we saw that happen, and then we lost complete control when Richard Nixon made his move in the early 1970s, known as the Nixon shock, pulling us off the gold standard. And of course, we know the story of JFK, perhaps one of a few reasons why his life was eliminated with the silver certificates through the Executive Order 11110, which, of course, Lyndon Johnson revoked immediately after he had his hands in the assassination. Anyway, I've got to wrap up. My producers give me a heads up here. Sheila, please weigh in, if you will, on the economic-related issue. And then I've got a sort of a non-standard question that I don't usually ask of this panel that I'm going to close out the show with. But Sheila, please, on the central bank implosion and the good news of the restoration of sound money.
Well, you hit it with Nixon, and that was all done by Kissinger. Kissinger went around the world. Remember, they said all of our gold went to OPEC, and none of that's true. They stole our gold. And Kissinger made everybody around the world do the fiat dollars. Why? Everything that's out in circulation, we were paying interest on with our tax dollars. That's why our taxes kept going up. And since the 50s, 60s, they've been saying it. And there's all sorts of videos on YouTube. The guys in the black suits back in the 60s and saying, we don't care what title you put on it, but spend the money, spend the money. And we don't care what you put on it, just keep spending the money, spend the money. So that's where we've been. But if we go back to how this formulated, I mean, when they did this to Nixon and they took it off, never in our nation did we ever have where the pendulum kept swinging up on real estate. Never. And so, and all the prices on the fuels and et cetera. So, and taxes on all of that. So this is what they did. Nixon was set up. It's the first time that it went off and didn't come back on. We never went back on the gold standard. And so when they took it off, it had never gone off more than 26 years, and they didn't fulfill by that, which they said they would. But they had to get rid of Agnew, Spiro Agnew, to get Ford in. I think Ford was Speaker of the House. They brought him in. So then when they get Nixon out, then they put Ford up, And people had no idea the controlling guy that Ford was seemed like a mild-mannered guy, and he wasn't. And so they bring him in, and who did they bring in from the outside? They brought in Nelson Rockefeller as the vice president. Nothing has been the same in this
Boom.
country since Kissinger
Right.
did all of that. So when all of that
Yeah.
happened and the money changed completely, because if you used to, in the 1800s, this is always the humor, it's all done by inflation. And so the gold price controls it from being out of control inflation. And so the same gold coins in the 1800s would have bought you a house in the 1900s, would have bought you a house in the 2000s. By doing that in the 1970s, they changed everything. And Johnson
Mhm.
didn't just take us off of that silver certificate process. Uh, Kennedy had taken us out of Vietnam, and he signed us back in on the flight back. And so,
Yep.
but you have to go back to Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson was credited with the Industrial Revolution. They made him the governor of New Jersey, and he was raised in Augusta, Georgia, and so that's where he got his start. But what happened is he became a club member that was so strategic because industrial revolutions have matched with the wars. And they keep saying the third industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution, and that's how they've been playing the game. But as soon as they made him president, Woodrow Wilson did all of this and put it in our Constitution as amendments. So they put in the Federal Reserve, they put in the IRS. All of this happened within days of him being elected. It all moved that fast. And he also changed the terms. There used to be no midterm elections. So they affected the elections, they affected the money, they affected all of this in 1913. And so just boom, 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 put us into World War One, boom, boom, boom. Did Liberty bonds, gave it all to Europe. Nobody in America, billions of dollars in Liberty bonds to help America. It all went to Europe. All of this was set in motion to the destruction of where we are now. There were times where they tried to bring it back and the pendulum swung the other way, but it's never been as bad as it is right now. The properties, even in California, that were 500 hitting up to 550, 600,000 for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, okay, are now 1.7 to 1.9 million. What are the chances of anybody buying anything? And so what they did to the generations, they called them millennials and then XYZ, all happened between 2000 and 2020. And the Z can't buy anything, can't do anything. But what was that telling us is that they were done with us. So not only did the elections change and the 2 terms of Congress, and then out of your Congress reps, they check this, they select the senators, the 2 for each state. That makes it easy that if they aren't doing what they need to do for the state, you pull them out and replace them with one of the other Congress reps until the 2 years is up. And so now, instead of 2-year, and this was still going on in the 70s when this happened with the gold. And then as soon as the 2 years met whatever that criteria was for the number of years they could continue the 2-year terms, then it all flipped. And that's why senators became 6. That's why they became popular vote. So then that's when everybody started working international. What's Congress doing? Flying all over the world, doing deals all around the world. I mean, everything changed. So guys, our money has been negotiated and everything redirected around the world by the representatives and the senators who are now global deal guys instead of representing for the states. So everything changed. And now by getting back, and I think that's the process of getting us back to constitutional money. And the reason why you call it constitutional money is because everything was required to be minted by our mint. It wasn't to be controlled by any other sources or any other manipulation. And it's all to be it's not based on commodities. We haven't had a basis of our currency since they did this to us in the 1970s with Nixon. And so when we come back to that, that's the goal that we have, is to come back to the Constitution, and get rid of the 405 extra, to come back to the Constitution and get rid of all the bureaus, not just the FBI, but all of these were just added they have no involvement in our Constitution. They aren't being included in our Constitution. It was all added to us, and they just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's why we are where we are today. That's why when people say, well, what do you mean our currency doesn't have any value? They took the value away in 1970, and we haven't had any value, and that's why the inflation taking these houses from what shouldn't have even been 500,000, 500,000, guys, really. I mean, from where we were at, now most houses 145 to 250,000, and it just when it was swung up, it just never stopped, and it just keeps going up and up and up. And it's because they were being funded out of the organizations they set up. So when they had all these remodeling shows on TV, you bring in these people to buy up the houses. Who are these people? They're being funded through BlackRock and Vanguard, and all this was happening, and everybody was like, aren't these shows amazing? And all this, and you've got the equity in your house, so you can spend another 210,000 and remodel it. They did all of this so that Americans weren't going to be able to even afford homes. And so it's not just a problem with X, Y, and Z generations, and they were saying, we're done with you. So that's where we are, and it's all been done and just steadily become worse and worse and worse because they put more and more and more control in. That very important word that Derek brought up. All that they've done is that piece of paper to control us because they decide whether it has value or not.
What a great analysis of the intricate, detailed, and brilliant, of course, corrupt and evil plan that they executed, let's say from 113 years ago right till now. Now, the antithesis of that is what's happening. We have a plan equally creative, equally detailed, and we're about to flip the 113 years of madness upside down. That's where we're getting very close. It's all set, and we're going to be ushered into this. I publish a show and host a show. It's the only show I do live, Global Financial Reset, every Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. And perhaps I'd like to extend an invitation to some of the folks on this panel to join us in that broadcast where we spend the whole 90 minutes just on the economy. We talk about the repatriation of wealth. We had retired Lieutenant Colonel Tom Lennox on, who talked extensively about repatriation, spoke extensively about the birth certificate. We had a powerful segment on that to dispel the myths that it's a conspiracy theory. It is not. Anyway, time is of the essence here. I want to set this question up first. There's a lot of attention that I see out there in the public square, if you will, within our movement, about issues that we normally wouldn't take on in a military-based panel, talking about the war we're engaged in. But you know what? It's an appropriate question to ask. And so therefore, I'm going to go there. We'll start with Michael Jaco. We'll go through the board, and then we'll wrap up. Do you believe, Michael, that there are, let us say, non-human entities involved with Earth at this time? Galactic partners, we know about clones, masked individuals, CGI, aliens, reptilians. Question is, do you believe there are non-human entities in some fashion or another involved with planet Earth right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people that I have worked with in the past believe that as well. I've done a lot of shows. I've been on Gaia, Cosmic Disclosure, where I talk about a lot of the secret space program stuff. You look at Operation High Jump. That's where Admiral Byrd went down to Antarctica to basically take on the Nazis that were still down there, and they sent him home running because they had extremely high technology, and they destroyed part of his fleet. So they took off. So the Nazis had obviously gotten advanced technologies, Draco Reptilian. So Draco Reptilian, if you look at the Gene Roddenberry Star Trek series, the Klingons were, he even said that, and he was a former Air Force guy, and he talked about how, Star Trek was real. He was basically just letting everybody know what was already out there. And so we've seen a lot of this over the years where, we've seen all these movies and so forth that have leaked all of this. I think this is the year where we're going to see probably disclosure. So it'll be very interesting. A lot of people have already been exposed to it. Many of us have been talking about it. Brad and I have talked about this quite extensively in shows. So it is one of those things that, it's still, forbidden knowledge, so to speak, where a lot of people don't talk about it. And that's on purpose because they don't want this to be revealed. So there's a lot of pushback, MJ12. I've been pushed back on some of this stuff. I know a lot of people that spoke out about this stuff that are no longer with us. They really crank down on people that disclose this. So, bravo to you on bringing this. This is a very touchy subject, and get you in a lot of trouble. You have to be very brave to talk about this. So, yeah, kudos and bravo to you, John, for bringing it up. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Michael. And quick question: would it be a fair statement to say that some of these non-human entities of sorts are friend and foe? I mean, would that?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I think we're in the process of overcoming the foes. It's moving in a very quick direction. That's why there will be disclosure, more disclosure. I think disclosure has been going on for quite some time, but it'll reach a higher level, and more people. I've seen some of these creatures myself, so it is, and so have some of my comrades. We've talked about it, so it is something that does exist, and like I said, more disclosure comes out. And the benevolent and good ETs that are out there, which are far more than the evil ones. So we just unfortunately have been captured for a little while, and we're breaking free from that.
Yes, and to our audience that may be getting the jitters at this moment, just remember God's on the throne all the time. God's in
Absolutely.
control. God always wins. We got this. And thank you, Michael, for sharing that with us. We'll dive into this. I'd like to maybe do a special report with you at some point, or some other broadcast. If you and Brad know this stuff, we'll off this military panel. We'll jump more into that at a later time. Derek, do you want to comment on this topic? I know there's no executive orders you can refer to concerning this, but yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Have you not seen Janet Reno? Have you seen Whoopi Goldberg? I mean, they had to sneak up on the water fountain to get a drink of water, so they make a good excuse, right? I mean, I can bring the humor into this, but no, I mean, in all seriousness,
Yeah.
Jaco, great expert on this, especially because, I mean, when you get into top secret clearances and up, and I know a lot of people with the TSSCI plus the Q clearance, et cetera. I mean, we're talking things that, no, it's not your normal conversation, and it's not your normal even campfire conversation, unless some tequila has been involved or some of that other firewater, as we call it in the South, right? But so many people are afraid of that. But my grandfather was someone who loved this conversation. He loved to think about what about God we don't know about? What is there that we don't know? I mean, I know those stars are there, but I don't know really what they are. We call them that. I've never been there. But my grandfather was a Native American, so I love those conversations, and I know that we do have that. And then we have obviously Area 51, and that's just one location. It's not that people hear Area 51, but there's a lot of areas that are most people have not been to. You even have to have clearance to fly over it. I've flown over it one time. Jaco can probably speak on certain things. He can't speak on others, we know. But Colonel Sellers, been there. A lot of people have been there that can't even speak. And as Jaco said earlier in the show, that there's things that have been classified for so long that it has to be the right time. Because in reality, look at the years Jaco's been in. We're just talking Jaco alone. Look at the years that he sacrificed doing what he did, especially as a Navy SEAL. Navy SEALs, they're gone. I always make a joke in a light way, but in a reality way, they're gone 400 days of the year, right? So, we're talking about sacrifice that people have done their whole life, and the good guys and gals that's done it, but it has to be where people appreciate it, because someone has also lost their life over this as well. And at the end of the day, that's what we talk about more in the military is the loss of life. And we try to prevent that, but we have brothers and sisters. That's why we wear these bracelets. Some of us wear them for memorial's sake. So it's a sensitive subject. It's a real subject. But yes, there are definitely classifications. And I know other people that cannot be a part of this panel, but could obviously contribute if they could to this subject matter. But I know it does scare some people. But like you said, God is on the throne. We're not taking away from God. We're not talking, we're not taking away from the light, nothing of that manner. But even the Bible talks about demons. It talks about evil spirits. I mean, that's what we're fighting. That is the very entity we're fighting. But talking about Colonel Lennox really quick, he and I met last March in Miami at Trump Doral at the Charlie Ward event, and so I, he made me a firm believer, and Jaco already kind of had me on the fence with it, and this is just me growing where I'm at in my life too. But Colonel Lennox made me a believer in time travel, not from rhetoric and not from dialect, not from anything of that nature. I sent a photo of him. I said, don't take this as an insult at your age, but I sent a photo of him to my mother, and I said, who does this look like? She's like, I don't know outside of Papa. Colonel Lennox looks just like my grandfather. I'm talking identical. And look, we are. My grandfather's been gone 20 something years now. So Colonel Lennox and I connected just like that. And then the topics, and then where we are in the world, and what we're talking about, and where we're going, and where we're headed, and then also the people who have kind of been left in the dark. And then we were sitting by the pool at Trump Doral, and everybody's just sitting there talking, and he and I look up, and I got it on video, and I've got multiple on video, but I got this one in particular. It was a shiny object way above aircraft level. And then, see, this is where people don't appreciate and can't appreciate because they don't have the experience with whatever their MOS, whatever it was. But like, I'm an air missile defense guy. That's what we train to do. That we're trained to see aircraft wings out of clouds. I mean, just that quick. This was wasn't an aircraft, but it was shiny, right? And then it's moving. You can see it with your naked eye, but it was way above aircraft. And we just so happened to be right there by the aircraft. I mean, aircraft come over Trump Doral all the time, right there. I mean, just nonstop. This is way above. And it was a shiny object. And we got everybody around there to see it. We have all those witnesses, which was great. It was awesome. And Colonel Lennox just looked at me, and he just, just like my grandfather, just winked. And because when you know, right? And, for people out there listening, if you believe and someone thinks you're crazy, let them, right? It's not worth the argument. But at the same time, when you know, and then there's friendlies you can see all around if you know what you're looking for. That they're not aircraft. Aircraft have unique characteristics, and then sound if you know what you're listening to, and just eyesight and certain lights and whatnot. But I was down in Miami before that and saw an aircraft that we have in our portal that can be in your sight, and then all of a sudden it can hit invisible just like that. People don't realize the technology that we have alone. But yeah, there's things that people, whether it freaks them out or not, but outside of the jokes, but just look at Whoopi Goldberg, and that'll help you get into the mode.
You heard it here from Derek Johnson. Thank you, Derek. A quick comment. Again, God is in control. I reiterate that. And second, it's been my understanding, and anyone on this panel can correct me if I'm wrong, that the presidents, all of our presidents over many, many decades, have been privy to UFO files, we'll call it, and intelligence of that type. And Michael seems to be confirming that, so we can take that to the bank. And so this isn't crazy talk, folks. And I do believe, like Michael said a moment ago, we're going to come to a point where we'll actually start. We're at a time of revelation, time of reveals, time of exposure. But we always equate that to deep state related characters that we want to arrest and try at Gitmo. While all that's true and happening and good, this is also something that's to be revealed responsibly and slowly over time. And I believe that's going to be happening. We'll take the same question to Brad and then Sheila, and we'll wrap up the broadcast. Take it away, Brad.
Sure. I think it's important for people to see it from a grounded standpoint. First and foremost, NORAD and NATO acknowledge it. And Space Force wasn't just created as it was originally initiated by President John F. Kennedy, the starter, as many people are familiar with that adage, and then the finisher, President Trump, brought it into reality. So Space Force during Kennedy's administration, isn't that interesting? And from an acknowledgement standpoint, if anybody wants to do a little fact finding, there's a gentleman by the name of Paul Hellyer, H-E double hockey sticks, Y-E-R, and he was the National Defense Minister for Canada from like 1963 to 67. And he was at the Washington National Press Club in 2001 when that guy, Stephen Greer, everybody's familiar with that name now, came out to do the request for disclosure with military, senior military, the American governments and other governments, saying we want disclosure on not only UFOs, but also extraterrestrials. And what Paul Hellyer did is said, extraterrestrials are 100% real. They live among us. We've known about this in Canada since I was a national defense minister being briefed, as well as the craft. And then between 2014 and 2022, Department of National Defense in Ottawa at NDHQ acknowledged and started releasing some redacted and classified documents on the over 15,000 UFO sightings that had been reported and or investigated. And from a personal level, I've had several incidents of witnessing what you would call, UFO craft from the age of 12, coming home with Royal Canadian Air Cadets on a Thursday night with my dad in the car up our street. And we live just about 35 kilometers away from Pearson International Airport. And we see these aircraft sky go crazy, going all around each other for several minutes. My dad didn't speak. And when they finally just disappeared. They went like up into the heavens, disappeared. We got home and we called the Brampton Regional Police Department at that time. This is pre-911. Couldn't get through, because who are you going to call? Like Ghostbusters, right? Finally got through, let them know what we had saw. They said, we know about it. And at recess the next day in school, because this is young elementary school for me, all the kids had heard about it. Everybody had heard about it. But there was no mention in the news. So just like we've seen now from a conspiracy standpoint over these last several years, as much of what doesn't get acknowledged in the mainstream, which is like one of the biggest tells as well that yes, it's true, because they didn't have Reuters and AP fact checks back then in the 80s, right? And then Derek and I together in Arizona with Mark Atwood, we walk out after, having a chat on Truth Tour, and Mark's like, there we go. And we look up and we're seeing the craft in the sky appearing. We actually had one in Cheyenne, Wyoming, which I think one of the guys on Truth Tour, Lewis's crew, Doug Wright, caught on camera, which is believed to be a Space Force TR-3B or whatever that craft designation is. And just the final aspect of this for people, there's analog video all the way up until relative video today that you could find off your iPhone of people whose eyes will shapeshift on camera. Camera lenses have changed in the media over the years. Then you can go back to that. You can find those online. You can actually put it through the Hive or other AI or fake news type of trickery lens filters and find out that some of that is actually fact. You have the photographs. And in an age right now where information is at your fingertips and it's easy for you to not just leverage intuitive discernment, but actually go out and do deep dive research and pull this together, there's so much out there to acknowledge that, yes, it is, whether it's the pyramids of Giza and everything that lives underneath it, to Atlantis, to all these other things and off continent, but there's nothing to be afraid of from my standpoint. Whether it's the lizard people that lived under LA in 1934, acknowledged in whatever it was, the LA Times, right? In all those dens, to other off-world people living among us who also might be operational right now in the Department of War because of what they do. And maybe they have a hand at that 6th generation F-47 fighter. I don't know. It's really remarkable because we're at the tipping point with disclosure to be a spacefaring race once again. I say once again, from what I've learned, and I'm 100% not only intuitively, but know that we are about to be a spacefaring race once again. And just take a look at the last 2 weeks of announcements. Directed energy weapons acknowledged last week by the Department of War, laser beams, right? And now that's acknowledged. And then some of the other craft and the cloaking mechanisms that Darren mentioned, just like the Klingons did in Star Trek with Gene Roddenberry. I think it's freaking amazing.
Incredible. And folks that might be thinking, why is Chambers invoking this subject on a wartime analysis panel? Well, we might as well know all the players in the war, friend and foe. So we've invoked this discussion for that very reason. I want to thank everyone for commenting on that. Sheila, will you close us out with any experiences you have, comments, opinions, or facts you care to share with us about the subject of non-human entities, if you will, here on Earth?
There's many. My father was a medic in the Army, and he witnessed a lot of things. He was at Area 51, and and all he would say, yes, that's true. No, that's not. They're making it up. That's dramatic. No, that's real. And that's all he would say. He only discussed it with other Army buddies. He wouldn't discuss it with us. And so that I know that aspect of it. What I'm more familiar with is the lizard people, the reptilians, globally, I've seen it, I've witnessed it. I've witnessed shape shifting, and the children that are pulled out. That's one of the things they're describing right away, because they've never been around anything like this, and they've actually, when they've been in the lines waiting to see whether or not they're going to live or die, or they're going to be tortured, or whatever's going to happen with the evil people in the world that capture our children. They've seen them shapeshift, and they know who they are, and they know how to pick them out. And globally, you see big bears at entrances with gates and everything, and those are around the world. And the reptilian people have that same. It's the same design of a reptilian with certain kind of feet and the face and the front of the face coming straight out. And I thought, well, there's just nothing like that in America. And then I come to Georgia, and I'm invited within 2 weeks of being in Georgia to go to South Carolina and witness, because they felt that I would understand about the reptilians, and they're actually finding them, that they were buried. And there's so many people. It's just become a thing in Georgia and South Carolina, that if you have a lot of property, you make this big pond. So they make this big pond, and sooner or later, one or two of these reptilians that were buried there long ago have now surfaced. And they have, there's one area in South Carolina where they have found several. And so I know that if people are listening, they're like, oh my gosh, Sheila Holm has even seen this. I mean, I can hear the messages now, but I don't
Okay.
share or talk about this, because I don't think that people are understanding the variables in this, because we have some Mangala experiences that look a lot like the people they show as UFOs, with the shape of the head and the eyes and everything, because they were trying to figure this out themselves. They were crossbreeding. They were doing all these things. And so now in my studies of how those people were paid to come to America and do all these things in America, and how they had land down in South America and did all the flying in private planes, so we didn't know how they traveled or got here. Those people, most of them were shape-shifting. Queen Elizabeth, actually, some of the children that felt they were honored, and there's an article about this where she and Philip went, and they went to one of the orphanages or something, and they handpicked children out that thought they were being honored, that they were great children, and they were able to go with them to Balmoral and etc. Well, then they experienced all these things that nobody else would comprehend or understand. And so it comes down to the bloodlines and the breeding, and there's a whole mixture. But now I've not personally witnessed what Jaco has witnessed, because I haven't been around the things from the other worlds, but mainly the process of the reptilians, the experimental people, and the experimental breeding that has caused some that look like the ones they use in the movies with the big eyes for being people who came in on UFOs. And so that's my experience in this. And I never have shared this, and I never knew anyone would be interested in this, because it's a scary thing when you see what they actually look like, and how they can look just like we do in one moment, and the very next moment they're completely different. And now what people are depicting is that they're wearing a mask, just like some of the other people are wearing a mask. And when there's the demasking point in this world, we're going to find all sorts of things that look so completely different with the mask. You take the mask off and what's underneath. And that's the way the children are describing the shape shifting. When that comes off, how they're able to hide this whole reptilian structure underneath these masks and look just like we do. That's what really has shocked the children. And so that's pretty much my whole experience, and knowing from Dad what was true and not true about Area 51.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad I asked the question, and I'm glad you shared your experiences and what you have come to learn. And to our viewers, I'm sure there's a lot of folks out there that have some stories to tell too. You can send me an email, john@jmcbroadcasting.com, and I'll do my best to respond to your communication. We're going to bring this episode to a close. It's been an extended 3+ hours. I first off thank this panel, this esteemed panel, for your time and contributions to the questions I've asked and raised for the American people and the people all over the world today. And I want to thank my two producers as well. And for those that want to learn, I think our audience knows everyone fairly well on this panel. But for those who don't, newly coming aboard, a lot of folks are. Our viewership is over 5 million a month right now in terms of the 9 shows that I publish throughout the course of a month. We have hard third-party analytics we've been doing for years, and so there's a lot of eyes and ears here. Please continue to share the show, share the work. It's important work. And what I was saying is on my website, jmcbroadcasting.com, on the upper left-hand corner, you'll see a yellow tab at the navigation bar called Contributors. So if you want to learn more about the contributors are on this panel and many others that I host on my shows, their photograph, biographies, and links to their world is there. Please visit that and get connected with everyone on this panel because they do far more work than just giving me the opportunity to speak with them here, which I thank you all very much. I salute our